Chapter 1554. Roar. After being blocked by the two mechanical beauties, the dark demon dragon roared, lifted its front leg, and slammed it into the ground. Boom! The ground shook and suddenly cracked open, and sharp stone pillars drilled out of the ground. Before the two mechanical beauties could show their strength, they were pierced through by the stone pillars on the ground. These two ladies were obviously not defensive pets. They had just withstood the dark demonic dragon's brutal charge, and now they had suffered a solid earth stomp. They turned into rays of light on the spot and returned to Liao Yuan's pet space. Their fates were extremely miserable. Even the dark demon dragon, who had been single for 10,000 years, could not stand Liao Yuan's flashy behavior. Meow, who was holding two beauties in front of, "I'll kill you, you piece of trash." See, this is the shamelessness of the system. How are you going to block an attack from the ground? Can you fly? Of course, Liao Yuan could not fly, but compared to the two mechanical beauties who died tragically, Liao Yuan was still quite agile. He dodged backward and rolled, easily escaping from his range. However, at this moment, the dark demon dragon lowered its head again and used savage charge on Liao Yuan. Damn, this guy's skills don't have cooldowns? Liao Yuan was shocked, but he had just used roll, and dodge was on cooldown. It was too late to escape. Just as Liao Yuan was about to be crushed to death by the dark demon dragon, a white light suddenly wrapped around Liao Yuan. The next moment, Liao Yuan was pulled in front of Wang Yu. At this time, the Fruit Knight, who had been sent flying, had also run back. He raised his shield and used Shield Wall to block the dark demon dragon's charge. Lady Heavenly Fragrance waved her umbrella, and a series of healing spells landed on the Fruit Knight's head, ensuring his HP. Wang Yu pointed at the dark demon dragon and said to Liao Yuan, "Shoot him." "Are you kidding me? I'll die." Liao Yuan's hand trembled, and he almost shot Wang Yu's face. Meow. After a few rounds of fighting, everyone knew that the dark demon dragon could reflect damage. Wasn't Wang Yu asking him to attack the dark demon dragon, asking him to die? "I don't have the time." Wang Yu pointed at the dark demon dragon again and said stubbornly, "If you don't shoot him, I'll kill you. How do you want to die?" As he spoke, Wang Zheng raised his fist. F***CK. Liao Yuan wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had never seen someone like this. It didn't matter if you were killed by a monster or killed by your teammates. Both of these ways of dying were quite stupid, but if you were killed by a monster, then so be it. If you were killed by Wang Yu, you might even offend Wang Yu. Offend Wang Yu? Was this a joke? Ever since he saw a creature like Wang Yu, Liao Yuan was determined to be friends with Wang Yu. In desperation, Liao Yuan had no choice but to draw his bow and shoot an arrow unwillingly. After shooting, Liao Yuan quickly took out a bottle of medicine and prepared to drink it. .-12445 when the arrow struck the dark demon dragon's head, a critical damage value floated up above its head. When Liao Yuan saw this, he was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. He hurriedly poured a potion into his mouth, but to his surprise, the health bar above his head did not drop at all. "I knew it." Seeing that Liao Yuan was fine, Wang Yu smiled faintly. It was Liao Yuan who had started the fight. Liao Yuan had even used a skill when he shot an arrow. Even then, Liao Yuan was fine. This showed that the dark demon dragon's damage reflect could only reflect melee attacks. Seeing this scene, the others also came to their senses. Other than Wang Yu, Burning Prairie's team only had the Fruit Knight and the beautiful Enchantress. Fruit Knight was a tank. Under normal circumstances, he would not deal damage. Stunning Beauty had already died, so naturally, the others would not hold back. Sisterly waved her staff and threw a string of icicles at the dark demon dragon. Pung 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 pung. The dark demon dragon's body was huge. The icicles all hit, and the dark demon dragon's movements became extremely slow. The pressure on Fruit Knight was greatly reduced. Liao Yuan took out two mechanisms and inserted them into the ground. Two crossbows were propped on either side of Liao Yuan. Two. The crossbows were like machine guns, aimed at the dark demon dragon. Liao Yuan also drew his bow and shot arrow after arrow at the dark demon dragon's head. Naturally, Wang Yu was not idle. Although he could not fight in melee, as a martial artist, Wang Yu did not lack range skills. Chi Wave, Cloud Palm, Double Dragon Burst, and other range skills were thrown at the Dark Demon Dragon. Fighting a boss like the Dark Demon Dragon was the easiest. As long as the front line was stable, the healers could keep up, and the damage output would be mindless. With such a large target, there was no need to worry about missing the target. Moreover, Chi Master skills had short cooldowns. Wang Yu also had many pieces of equipment that reduced cooldowns. The casting speed of his skills was not much slower than Liao Yuan's. With his top-tier equipment, Wang Yu's damage was naturally terrifying. Every skill dealt tens of thousands of damage to the Dark Demon Dragon. 10 million damage to the Dark Demon Dragon was not a small amount, but could not withstand such mindless damage output. Under Wang Yu, Liao Yuan, and the others' crazy attacks, the Dark Demon Dragon's health bar dropped at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, the Dark Demon Dragon's health bar dropped to 30%. The game had been open for a long time, and everyone knew that the boss critical point was 30% red health. Everyone present was a top-tier expert, so how could they not know? Fruit Knight, retreat. Seeing that the Dark Demon Dragon's health bar was red, Wang Yu immediately ordered the Fruit Knight to retreat. The Fruit Knight activated Shield Wall in an extremely professional manner. He raised a shield and took a few steps back, exactly 1.5 meters. This was the standard range of the boss's critical point. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. After its health bar dropped to 30%, the Dark Demon Dragon did indeed go berserk. However, it did not go berserk like everyone expected. Instead, it rolled on the ground and turned into a ball. The shell on its back protected it. Shing! Immediately after, there was the sound of sword being unsheathed. Sharp spikes protruded from the Dark Demon Dragon's shell, pointing straight to the sky. It was extremely terrifying. Could this Dark Demon Dragon be a pangolin that cultivated into a spirit? Liao Yuan muttered in surprise. He pulled back his bowstring and shot an arrow. Clang! With a soft sound, Liao Yuan's arrow was bounced off and fell to the ground. -1, a pitiful number floated up, as if mocking Liao Yuan for overestimating himself. Plus 2333 before Liao Yuan could get angry. Another number popped up, and the Dark Demon Dragon's health bar began to slowly recover. F***CK. Seeing the scene, everyone was dumbfounded. Well, they had seen shameless people, but they had never seen one this shameless. Melee damage reflected. Long-range damage -1. Chapter 1555. In response to everyone's questions, the system had only one answer. Yes. Sisterly might have eaten pangolins in real life. Pangolins are protected animals. Please don't eat them. Seeing that the Dark Demon Dragon had rolled into a ball, she casually threw a fireball at it. Bang! The raging flames engulfed the Dark Demon Dragon. The Dark Demon Dragon was unharmed, but Sister Lee's HP bar dropped by a large chunk. Everyone, alright, this monster was determined to go back on its word. Not only did it ignore long-range physical attacks, it even reflected magic attacks. What a stinky and stubborn monster. I don't know what went wrong with the designer's brains to come up with such a thing. Fortunately, Sister Lee was an ice mage and not proficient in fire magic. Otherwise, she would have been blown up. Plus 2333, just as everyone was feeling depressed, another number floated above the Dark Demon Dragon's head. The number seemed to be mocking them. Girls had always been more emotional than rational. Being mocked by the Dark Demon Dragon, the Fruit Knight angrily raised her shield and smashed it. However, the spikes on the Dark Demon Dragon's body flashed. -5322, the Fruit Knight received double damage and a bleeding effect. F***CK. How we fight this thing? There's no solution. Seeing this, everyone felt a headache coming on. Alright, it was unmoved by force or persuasion. It was basically a scoundrel. Why should we fight it? If we don't kill it, the players will all die. What was worse was that the Dark Demon Dragon was automatically regenerating its HP. It could heal over 1,000 at a time. If they ignored it, wouldn't it be back to full health? Faced with Liao Yuan and the others' deplorable comments, Wang Yu remembered the famous words of Chuanjin's third-generation leader, Mr. Wuji. The mission of the game's boss was to be defeated by the players. There was no such thing as an unsolvable boss. As long as they observed it carefully, they would be able to find its flaw. Observe carefully. Wang Yu rubbed his chin and carefully observed the dark demon dragon. As expected, at this moment, Wang Yu saw an extremely difficult-to-detect dent in the middle of the dark demon dragon's body. After all, the dark demon dragon was not a ball. Even if it curled its body into a ball, there would still be gaps that the armor could not protect. Obviously, this dent was the flaw. Prairie fire. Hit him there. At this thought, Wang Yu pointed to the side of the tenebrous, demonic dragon. Where? Liao Yuan's eyesight was much better than Wang Yu's. He looked in the direction of Wang Yu's finger and immediately saw the gap beside the tenebrous, demonic dragon. He drew his bow and shot an arrow. Pooh! Blazing Prairie was in system mode. With the system's assistance, the hit rate was still very high. One arrow hit the bull's eye without any deviation. -11121 AQ damage value floated up, and everyone clenched their fists in excitement. Damn it, there was indeed a flaw. After learning the dark demonic dragon's weakness, Liao Yuan took out 2 mechanical crossbows and stuck them into the ground. He aimed at the dark demonic dragon and fired wildly. A string of damage values appeared above the dark demon dragon's head, and its HP began to fall again. However, Wang Yu and the others had clearly underestimated the tenebrous demonic dragon's strength. This beast was not one to be bullied without retaliating. After being shot by Liao Yuan, the tenebrous demonic dragon's body swayed, and it began to roll around on the ground. This time, Liao Yuan was completely flustered. It was not that they had never shot a moving target before, but it depended on the size of the target. The monsters in Rebirth were not small. Even if they ran back and forth, they could easily hit them with the system's assistance from a distance of more than 10 meters. As for whether or not they could hit a vital point, it was up to fate. The gap on the dark demonic dragon's body was only the size of a fist, and now it was rolling around on the ground. Wasn't this a trap? Even with the system's assistance, they still had to aim, right? Plus 2333, just as Liao Yuan was in a daze. Another healing number floated above the dark demonic dragon's head, and it laughed mercilessly at Liao Yuan. Seeing this, Wang Yu could not help but urge, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and shoot. Shoot your ass." Liao Yuan was also anxious, and he shouted gloomily, "Shoot one for me to see. I'll shoot if I want." As he spoke, Wang Yu stepped to Liao Yuan's side. At the same time, he grabbed the bow in Liao Yuan's hand. Seeing the weapon in his hand taken away, Liao Yuan could not help but be stunned. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Wang Yu casually knocking an arrow and releasing the bowstring. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. The arrow hit the dark demonic dragon's body with unerring accuracy. -23333. Although Wang Yu did not have archery skills like Liao Yuan, his martial arts talent allowed him to be proficient in any weapon. In addition, his attributes were much higher than Liao Yuan's, so the damage of this arrow was actually higher than Liao Yuan's. Liao Yuan, what a godly shot! Don't tell me it's a fierce shot. When the arrow hit, the girls thought it was Liao Yuan who shot it, and could not help but cheer. However, when they turned around and saw Wang Yu holding the bow in his hand, they were instantly stunned. At this time, Liao Yuan's eyeballs had already popped out, and he pointed at Wang Yu in shock. You're an archer? Obviously, I'm a grandmaster of combat." Wang Yu smiled faintly. This is impossible." Liao Yuan was dumbfounded, and he could not believe his eyes. Archers were an extremely special profession in Rebirth. After all, archery was a skill, and it was not the same as wielding a sword or a spear. For melee professions, as long as they had skills, they could hold their weapons and slash upwards at such a close distance. However, when it came to archery, without the support of the system, normal people probably did not even know how to draw a bow. If one was not a professional, it was extremely difficult to hit someone from 10 meters away, let alone a fist-sized target from tens of meters away. Even with the support of the system, to hit the target, one had to rely on the crosshair to aim. The dark demonic dragon's vital point was so small, and it was moving at high speed. Even an experienced archer like Liao Yuan would have a hard time locking onto the target. Wang Yu was a grandmaster of combat, and he did not even have the support of an archer system. However, under such circumstances, he could shoot a fist-sized target moving at high speed. Such a terrifying scene was simply unbelievable. What was even more frightening was that Wang Yu still had a casual look on his face. His expression was so confident and indifferent, as if he had done something insignificant this time. Liao Yuan suddenly remembered that before this, Wang Yu had once said that his archery skills were very average, far worse than his. Liao Yuan had thought that Wang Yu was bragging, and his face was full of disdain. However, seeing this scene and thinking about his attitude at that time, Liao Yuan really wanted to give himself a hard slap. What did it mean by there was always someone better out there? It turned out that he was the same as the beautiful enchantress, a toad at the bottom of a well, completely unaware of how scary this world was. Chapter 1556. Unbeknownst to them, the bow, the sword, the stone steps, and the sword were the quintessence of Chinese kung fu. The art of archery was ranked number 1. Wang Yu started martial arts at the age of 4 and was able to shoot down a 100-pound bow at the age of 10. Even a sparrow flying in the sky could be shot down with one arrow, let alone a huge target like the dark demon dragon. However, there was no turning back. Once he made his move, he would definitely kill. It was a society governed by law. Martial arts practitioners were also particular about not going overboard. Usually, wooden weapons were used in competitions. Naturally, bows and arrows were not suitable for competitions. Therefore, compared to bows and arrows, Wang Yu preferred to use his fists and feet. Just look at Yang Na. This girl was an archer in manual mode. Although her accuracy was slightly lower than that of an ordinary player, the accuracy of an archer in manual mode was only slightly lower than that of a player in system mode. This level of accuracy was already quite amazing. After all, even an Olympic champion could not hit the target 100% of the time. What are you waiting for? Give me the arrows. Seeing Liao Yuan's stunned expression, Wang Yu could not help but crook his finger. Oh. Liao Yuan hurriedly removed the quiver from his waist and handed it to Wang Yu. Wang Yu took out 3 arrows, knocked the bowstring, and fired 3 arrows in a row. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of air being pierced rang out as the 3 arrows flew in a row toward the dark demon dragon. -2, 1, 1, 4, 5. The first arrow pierced the center of the dark demon dragon's vitals. The second arrow hit the tail of the first arrow. The game was still very humane. In order to prevent the awkward situation where the arrows were all stuck and the monsters had nowhere to attack, the old arrow would automatically disappear when a new arrow hit the old one. -2, 7, 4, 5. The second arrow hit the same spot. Just as the damage number appeared, there was another muffled sound. The third arrow also hit the dark demon dragon. -4, 5, 1, 2, 5. A critical hit damage number floated above his head. The 3 arrows took away nearly 100,000 HP from the dark demon dragon, but only 1 arrow pierced the dark demon dragon's vitals. In other words, Wang Yu's 3 arrows hit the exact same spot. This was manual mode, without the slightest bit of assistance from the system. The accuracy of the shots and the precision of the angle were unheard of. With the first arrow, perhaps everyone could say that he was just lucky, but this wave of 3 consecutive arrows was the real deal, without any blemishes. Liao Yuan and the others were completely stunned and lost the ability to speak. Now, they did not know how to express their emotions. Should he kneel and play the game, or should he prostrate himself and play the game? That was the question. The dark demon dragon was still rolling around on the ground, trying to avoid the damage. Unfortunately, Wang Yu's archery skills had reached a realm where he could do whatever he wanted. In layman's terms, he could hit wherever he wanted. After all, Wang Yu's opponents were all nimble practitioners of martial arts. A clumsy fellow like the dark demonic dragon would naturally not be able to dodge Wang Yu's arrows. Under Wang Yu's barrage of arrows, the dark demonic dragon's HP bar was finally emptied, and it turned into a streak of white light. It would appear that this trial was not part of an instance dungeon. Rather, it was part of the larger map. Crash! After the dark demonic dragon died, an exquisite box dropped. Wang Yu returned the bow to Liao Yuan and said, "Go and pick it up. I'll go inside and take a look." "Inside? Where?" Liao Yuan was puzzled. "The dragon's lair." Wang Yu smiled slightly, then went into the dark demonic dragon's lair. This dark demonic dragon was a quest monster, so there was no need to look at the items it dropped. It was definitely Liao Yuan's quest item. As a helper, Wang Yu was naturally too embarrassed to pick up the corpse. However, Wang Yu could be considered a veteran in the game. He knew that killing wild bosses was not just about picking up corpses. The places where the boss appeared would definitely have a lot of good items. Back when Wang Yu and Li Shui were doing the alchemy quest, they found 2 good skill books in a nearby treasure chest. The Dark Demonic Dragon's level was much higher than a level 30 quest NPC. Moreover, this beast was still a dragon's. What was the biggest characteristic of dragons? Collecting treasures. Would the Dark Demonic Dragon's lair be lacking in good items? Seeing a dragon's lair and not looting it would not be in line with the basic etiquette of the people of Chuanjin. Although the Dark Demonic Dragon was just a small trial boss, compared to Dragon Emperor Dale's and the other country bumpkin's dragons, this guy had much better taste. It was obviously a decent dragon. The Dark Demonic Dragon's lair did not have tacky gold coins, nor did it have glowing gems. Other than a bunch of glass decorations, it could be said that there were only 4 walls. Of course, we could also use the word poor to describe it. However, compared to the poor author, at least the Dark Demonic Dragon had a sizable lair. It did not need to pay a mortgage. The Dragon Canyon had good feng shui, and it had a wide view. The only drawback was that people would randomly come knocking on its door. Accidentally it was far away. In short, Wang Yu felt a wave of sympathy for the Dark Demonic Dragon's poverty. The Dark Demonic Dragon was already living in such a miserable state, and he still killed it. How heartless. In order to let the Dark Demonic Dragon rest in peace, to make the Dark Demonic Dragon's inheritance contribute to the game, Wang Yu quickly and efficiently turned the Dark Demonic Dragon's lair upside down. Finally, in a corner of the lair, Wang Yu found a treasure chest. As expected, all the good items of a boss were hidden in the treasure chest. Wang Yu excitedly took out a key from her pocket and carefully inserted it into the lock. Pada! The treasure chest opened and emitted a golden light. Wang Yu looked down. There were 2 skill books and a yellowish piece of paper placed neatly in the box. Bombardment, rare passive skill. Click to learn the skill Bombardment. When attacking a target with a long-range physical weapon, there's a chance to trigger a knockback effect. Class requirement, General Shock, rare passive skill. Click to learn the skill Shock. When attacking a target with a long-range physical weapon, there's a chance to trigger a stun effect. Class requirement, Use, Seeing the introduction of these 2 skill books, Wang Yu was very curious. Judging from the effects of the skills, these 2 skill books should be skills for archers, but the class requirement was general, which was a little strange. Although other classes could also use bows and crossbows, they were all offhand weapons and were rarely used under normal circumstances. Passive skills like these that had a chance to trigger were of little value. But for archers, these 2 skills were quite useful. After all, archers were extremely lacking in control skills. With these 2 skills and the high attack speed of archers, it should be more convenient for them kite. Give it to little Yang. Keep the goodies in the family. Of course, for these rare skills, he had to solve his internal needs first. Wang Yu mumbled to himself as he stuffed the 2 skill books in his bag, then picked up the yellowed blueprint. This is Chapter 1557. Godslayer Magic Bow Blueprint. Precious item. Use it to obtain the forging method for the legendary Godslayer Magic Bow. Requirement: Master Level Blacksmith. Legendary Weapon Blueprint. Looking at the old, yellowish paper in his hand, even a master like Wang Yu, who was always calm and collected, could not help but be stunned. Although he didn't know what the attributes of the Godslayer Magic Bow would be like, the name alone was enough to tell that this weapon wasn't ordinary. After all, gods and demons were at the top of the food chain in this world. God Slayer, Magic Vanquisher. With such arrogant names, one could only imagine how powerful they were. Otherwise, they wouldn't be worthy of such arrogant names. Logically speaking, although grandmasters of combat could use any weapon, their skills were all bare-handed skills, so there was no point in using a bow. However, martial artists could be proficient in any weapon, and Wang Yu was a grandmaster who was proficient in all kinds of weapons. His archery skills were unparalleled, so the blueprint wasn't useless to Wang Yu. Moreover, even if he sold a blueprint of this level, no one would dare to buy it because he needed to be a master-level blacksmith. Life professions in the game were extremely difficult to train, especially the last master level, which was extremely difficult to break through. The game had been open for so long, and the professional blacksmiths of the major guilds all had a stockpile of blueprints and materials, but most of them were stuck at the bottleneck of advanced blacksmith. There was no other reason than to be able to forge a legendary weapon like Wang Yu in order to advance to the master level. After all, there were only a few legendary weapons in the game. Other than the ones in Wang Yu's hands, there were no other legendary weapons that players could forge. This was because advanced blacksmiths could only forge dark gold equipment. If they wanted to forge legendary weapons, they would have to find another way. Even the few legendary weapons that Wang Yu had were all forged using legendary weapons as blueprints. There were almost none that were forged using blueprints. If even Wang Yu was like this, how could normal blacksmiths have the same luck as Wang Yu? Thus, Wang Yu was the only one in the game who had reached the master level, and he was even the official god of craftsmanship. The God Executioner Magic Bow recipe was a godly weapon forging recipe. According to the game settings, the God Executioner Magic Bow recipe generally had a higher chance of reaching full attributes than bosses. Hence, if the God Executioner Magic Bow recipe sold for a higher price than an actual godly weapon, the price of legendary weapons went without saying. No one would be so foolish to spend more money than a legendary weapon to buy a blueprint that they couldn't use. After thinking, Wang Yu clenched his teeth and used it. System notice: you have obtained the forging method for the God Vanquishing Bow. Wang Yu opened the skill window and opened the forging technique section. As expected, the God-punishing, demon-vanquishing Bow's blueprint had already lit up at the very bottom of the weapon forging section. Wang Yu's hands were cheap. She casually tapped on the blueprint, and a long list of materials appeared in front of her. Fine gold, meteoric iron, and so on. Forget about remembering them. Just looking at them made Wang Yu dizzy. In fact, Wang Yu did not even recognize the names of many of the materials. Wang Yu was dazzled. Just as he was about to close the list, a few familiar materials entered Wang Yu's eyes. Flame Heart, X, 1 Obsidian Stone, X, 1 Glory of God, X, 1 Reverse Dragon Scale, X1. Why does this look so familiar? Wang Yu couldn't help but rub his chin when he saw this. Although he didn't know what connection the god-slaying, demon-vanquishing Bow had with the martial god, the fact that these items were on the list of materials meant that his mission and Blazing Prairie's mission probably had some kind of connection. After all, even though Rebirth's game design was full of loopholes, it wasn't the author's fault, it was all the game's fault. The quest system was still very perfect. Sometimes, even different quests would be related in countless ways. This kind of setting was commonly known as the Easter egg system. The god-slaying, demon-vanquishing Bow had these materials, and its background story should be related to the martial god. Walking out of the Dark Demon Dragon's cave, Blazing Prairie had already packed up the Dark Demon Dragon's belongings. The so-called belongings were a box. It was most likely the blueprint of the God Devil armament. However, they hadn't left the Dragon Canyon yet, so they couldn't open the magic seal on it. Seeing Wang Yu walk out of the Dark Demon Dragon's cave, Blazing Prairie took out 2 fangs and handed them to Wang Yu. "Nyoga, this is for you." Wang Yu took the fangs and looked at them. Dragon tooth, precious material, can be used for forging. Then, he asked, "Why are you giving me this?" "That," Blazing Prairie said gratefully. "If it weren't for Nyoga, we wouldn't have made it here, let alone the Dark Demon Dragon. My goal is the God Devil armament blueprint." This material was also dropped by the Dark Demon Dragon. Although it's not very precious, I don't think we should keep it for ourselves. "Thank you very much." Wang Yu cupped his hands at Blazing Prairie and put the fangs into his bag. At the same time, his favorability toward Blazing Prairie increased quite a bit. Games were a world that magnified the evil side of human nature. Even a righteous gentleman like Iron Ox would inevitably have a dark side after playing games for a long time. In fact, Blazing Prairie could have given nothing to Wang Yu, but he still gave the materials to Wang Yu. It was clear that he was a very particular person. A particular person would never be annoying no matter where they were. A relatively simple person like Wang Yu naturally wouldn't hate this kind of person. Let's go. After cleaning up the battlefield, Wang Yu waved his hand, and everyone left the Dark Demon Dragon's nest. However, they had only taken a few steps when an announcement suddenly came from above Dragon Canyon. System notification. The master of Dragon Canyon, Dark Demon Dragon Adas, has been killed. Without the suppression of the Dark Demon Dragon's draconic aura, the monsters in Dragon Canyon have gone berserk. Loot will drop upon death. All players, please proceed with caution. Ho ho. Seeing this, Moonless Blossom and the others could not help but be surprised. Dragon's Canyon's terrain was extremely complex. Although Moonless Blossom's party had the map, they still had to make countless turns to reach the exit of Dragon's Canyon. Before they could even reach it, Wang Yu's party had already defeated the boss. Their speed was truly astonishing. Moonless Blossom's party had no idea how to fly like Wang Yu. I didn't expect them to kill it so quickly, Golden Sun Blossom said with a face full of surprise. We've only just reached the entrance. Moonless Blossom said coldly. Looks like this Dark Demon Dragon Adas isn't very strong. That's true. Chapter 1558. You couldn't blame Jean Rawawa for thinking this way. The Dragon Canyon was a rather disgusting map. There were many twists and turns along the way, and it was even more difficult than a maze. The map in everyone's hands was of little use, and this sort of maze was much scarier for the players than a boss. Everything else aside, Wang Yu was awesome, wasn't he? Do you know what he was most afraid of? Getting lost. Wang Yu wasn't afraid of fighting. How many powerful bosses had died under Wang Yu's feet? Getting lost was the only thing that made Wang Yu's hair stand on end. After all, to Wang Yu, anything that could be solved with force was not a problem, but getting lost was something that couldn't be solved with force. Now that he put it that way, everyone understood. Jean Rawawa wasn't the only one who thought this way. Wang Yu and the others were also depressed when they received this notification. Damn it, this game designer was just trying to kill the players. It was already very difficult to run in a maze like the Dragon Canyon. And now there was a monster rampage. The worst thing was to be caught off guard. If it was a flat map, it would be obvious at a glance. Farming monsters would be a piece of cake, and everyone could even be on guard. But what kind of map was the Dragon Canyon? Based on the system's behavior, it was obvious that it would farm monsters all over the map. The Dragon Canyon was full of twists and turns, and there was no telling when a bunch of monsters would jump out. Others might find love at the corner, but you'd find a dog at the corner, and it might be even more ferocious than a dog. What was there to play? Everyone would probably be surrounded by layers of fierce monsters before they could get far. Two fists couldn't fight four hands, and a hungry tiger couldn't fight a pack of wolves. Being surrounded by monsters, not to mention the Dragon Canyon, was a level 80 monster area. Even a level 1 wild dog would lose HP if it bit them. Looking at the dark forest, Wang Yu and the others fell into deep thought. The forest was full of danger now. If they really went in, who knew how they would die? Whoosh whoosh. Just when everyone was at a loss, there was a rustling sound in the forest. Then a few monkeys with bloodshot eyes and baring their fangs came out. Without a word, they jumped towards Liao Yuan. The monkey's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had jumped in front of Liao Yuan, raised its hand, and clawed at Liao Yuan. Liao Yuan was also a top-notch expert. His reaction was extremely fast, and he instinctively dodged backward to avoid Monkey's attack. At the same time, Wang Yu, who was next to him, reached out and grabbed Monkey's wrist. With a grab, he threw Monkey away. Bang! The monkey that was thrown by Wang Yu crashed heavily into its companion behind it and rolled into a ball. Before Liao Yuan could heave a sigh of relief, the other monkeys had already rushed in front of him. Burning Prairie was an archer. His melee combat skills were not considered high. He had already used his evasion skill, so he had no way of fighting back against monkeys' pouncing attack. Seeing that Liao Yuan was about to be clawed to death by the monkeys, Wang Yu's figure flashed and appeared in front of Liao Yuan to block him. He then turned around and used Spinning Thunderstomp to kick the monkeys to the side. At this time, Adorkable Eyes took out a totem and smashed it on the ground, giving everyone a buff. The Fruit Knight raised his shield and protected Liao Yuan with Wang Yu. Squeak, 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 squeak. After 2 rounds of fighting, there were more and more monkeys around them, and they were quickly closing in from all directions. Looking at the monkeys all over the ground, everyone was sweating profusely. This was not Dragon Canyon. This was Flower and Fruit Mountain. Okay. Even Wang Yu was sweating profusely. With Wang Yu's ability, it was naturally not difficult to shake off this group of monkeys. With Liao Yuan and the other skills, it was not like they had no chance of winning against these monkeys. But this was just the beginning. They had not entered the forest yet. If so many monsters suddenly appeared in the forest, everyone would probably be dead by now. Wang Yu could fly, so he could run whenever he wanted, but Liao Yuan and the others were in trouble. In a moment of daze, the encirclement of the monkeys had shrunk a little. These monkeys' eyes were red, and each of them bared their teeth at Liao Yuan, as if they were about to pounce on him. Wang Yu saw that these monsters were staring at Liao Yuan and did not care about the others. He could not help but wonder, Liao Yuan doesn't look like a female monkey. Why are these monkeys staring at him like they're in heat? Hearing what Wang Yu said, Liao Yuan was slightly stunned. He casually took out the box left behind by the dark demon dragon from his bag. Whoosh! As soon as Liao Yuan took out the box, all the monkeys' eyes suddenly turned to him. They stared at the box in Liao Yuan's hand, their faces full of desire. I see. Seeing this scene, everyone came to a realization. It was not that Liao Yuan looked like a female monkey, but that Liao Yuan was holding the relic of the dark demonic dragon in his hand. This thing was what the monsters in the Dragon Canyon wanted. Thinking of this, Liao Yuan was overjoyed. He took the box and poked the Fruit Knight in front of him, saying, "Fruit, why don't you take this thing? You're a tank, so you can take a beating." Scram! The Fruit Knight glared at Liao Yuan. What a joke, these monkeys were all male. Giving such a dangerous thing to a woman for safekeeping. Only this grandson Liao Yuan could think of. Tong Tong, you... Liao Yuan turned to look at Tong Tong. Goodbye. Tong Tong said as he was about to pull out his totem. How could he bear to let such a cute loli be ravaged by a group of monkeys? No. The reason why the monkeys didn't dare to surround them was because of the totem on Adorable Eyes. Now that Adorable Eyes was gone, everyone would be beaten up by the monkeys on the spot. Seeing that no one dared to take the box, Wang Yu helplessly extended his hand to Liao Yuan and said, "Give me the box." Nyoga. Liao Yuan was so touched that he burst into tears. "You're really my brother, but you're the only one with a map now. If something happens to you, none of us will be able to get out." The current situation was that whoever held the box would be attacked by the monsters. If the box was in someone else's hands, even if the person died, everyone could pick up the box and continue walking. However, if Wang Yu died, no one would be able to leave the Dragon Canyon. Not to mention the dangers of the giant Dragon Canyon. Even if there were no monsters, they would not be able to get out without a map. It doesn't matter. Wang Yu waved his hand and said, "I didn't want to bring you guys anyway." Liao Yuan and the others were shocked. "What do you mean?" Wang Yu said lightly. "In this situation, I can't leave even if I bring you guys. If I go alone, I can fly out." Then what about us?" Adorable Eyes panicked. "Uncle Iron Ox, I don't want to be trapped in this broken place forever." "It doesn't matter." Wang Yu smiled. "I have a way." "What way?" everyone asked in unison. Chapter 1559. What? Hearing Wang Yu's words, everyone was shocked. Cold sweat flowed down the back of their heads. Damn, this bastard must be crazy. It was one thing to kill others, but he even wanted to kill his own teammates. Chuanjin's mind was indeed different. "It's fine. It won't hurt." Wang Yu said as he pointed at the fruit knight at the front. Wang Yu's attack was so fast that before the fruit knight could react, Wang Yu's finger was already at his face. It was too late for the fruit knight to raise his shield to block. Smack! Wang Yu's finger landed on the fruit knight's forehead. The fruit knight felt his body tremble. He wanted to fight back, but he found that he could not move. The fruit knight was controlled. Without the protection of the tank, Liao Yuan and the others appeared in front of Wang Yu. In a panic, adorable pupil took out her totem and was about to smash it on the ground. The little girl had just lowered her head when Wang Yu's foot landed on her chin. Bang! The witch doctor was a cloth armor class. Her defense was comparable to that of a mage. Adorable pupil could not withstand Wang Yu's kick and was kicked into white light. Sigma, degree, winky face. Damn, he's for real. Seeing Wang Yu kick the adorable Tong to death, everyone turned pale with fright. After all, Liao Yuan and the others were not Xuanzhen's people who were very familiar with Wang Yu. Wang Yu was also not Lu Xuanda, who had incredible charisma. After all, they had only known Wang Yu for less than a day. They did not know each other well, let alone trust each other. Wang Yu's action scared Liao Yuan. He could not help but think, could it be that he wants the mythical equipment blueprints too? That was a possibility. The only requirement to obtain the blueprint of the divine and demonic equipment was the favorability of the dragons. Favorability. Wang Yu was the master of Dragon Emperor Dales. In this aspect, Wang Yu had an advantage over everyone else. Moreover, killing and robbing bosses was a common occurrence in the game. There were countless cases of people getting greedy at the sight of a piece of equipment. Even good friends who had played together for a long time could turn against them for a piece of equipment, let alone someone they had known for less than a day. What's more, Wang Yu came from Xuanzhen and was the famous #1 fighter in Xuanzhen. Everyone knew what the Xuanzhen sect was. This group of bastards was notorious for their evil deeds. Wouldn't cooperating with the Xuanzhen sect be asking a tiger for its skin? Wang Yu naturally knew that it was impossible for Liao Yuan's group to trust him wholeheartedly, so it was impossible for them to take the initiative to die. Therefore, without saying anything, he directly killed them. Wang Yu was ruthless, so Liao Yuan simply shed all pretense of cordiality. He raised his bow and shot an arrow at Wang Yu. Wang Yu casually made a grabbing motion and caught the arrow that Liao Yuan had shot at her. She took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of Liao Yuan. She suddenly thrust her hand forward and the arrow directly pierced through Liao Yuan's throat. A white light flashed, and Liao Yuan passed away. Sister Li had just finished condensing the spell in her hand, but before she could release it, Wang Yu slapped his hand. The cloud-capturing hand turned into a white light that wrapped around Sister Li's waist, pulling her to his side. He then raised his hand and punched Sister Li in the head. Wang Yu's actions were extremely fast, and he took care of 3 people in an instant. Tianxiang looked at the place where the 3 people disappeared in a daze. She wanted to cast a healing spell, but found that she couldn't do anything. Just as Tianxiang was at a loss, Wang Yu threw a fire dragon burst at her. The fire dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws and swallowed her whole. After killing Tianxiang, Wang Yu flashed to the Fruit Knight's side. He spread his wings and carried the Fruit Knight into the air. The Fruit Knight's acupuncture point was only poked by Wang Yu. It sounded a little awkward, but he could still speak. Seeing that Wang Yu had killed everyone else and only lifted him up, he was a little panicked. This damn cow doesn't like big Lolas, but is it only interested in young married women? Thinking of this, the Fruit Knight couldn't help but tremble. What do you want? I don't want. Wang Yu shook his head. The Fruit Knight was speechless. At this time, Wang Yu pointed below and said, I just want you to die with dignity. The Fruit Knight was stunned. He quickly looked down and saw that there were countless monkeys piled up at their feet. Without the totem's deterrence, the monkeys rushed over immediately. If it wasn't for Wang Yu's quick reaction, the Fruit Knight would have been trampled to death by these monkeys. Yes, they were stepping on her, because their target was Wang Yu. Seeing the squirming monkeys on the ground, the Fruit Knight felt dizzy. He even felt like vomiting. Do you want to be trampled to death by them, or do you want to kill yourself? Wang Yu asked calmly. Can I not die? The Fruit Knight asked. No, Wang Yu said. If you don't die, the mission won't be completed. Rebirth system was full of traps. The Dragon Canyon mission was marked with a number of people on both sides when they entered the map. Obviously, this mission wasn't just about getting the blueprint out. It was about getting everyone out of the scenario. The monsters were only interested in Wang Yu, who had the God Devil Gear blueprint. The Fruit Knight didn't have the blueprint. If he didn't die, he would have to walk around until the trial ended. If he failed the mission because the Fruit Knight didn't leave the map, that would be such a shame. You really aren't planning to steal the blueprint? The Fruit Knight asked. Steal the blueprint? Wang Yu was stunned. If I was here to steal the blueprint, I wouldn't have brought you guys here. The Fruit Knight was speechless after hearing Wang Yu's words. Liao Yuan and the others were also top-notch experts, but Wang Yu was able to kill them with a raise of his hand. It was clear that there was a gap between them. If Wang Yu had intended to steal the blueprint from the very beginning, there would have been no need for him to bring this group of burdens. All right, I'll die. The Fruit Knight nodded and slashed his neck. He chose to commit suicide. There was a flash of white light, and the Fruit Knight was teleported out of the map. In the giant dragon castle, Liao Yuan's team had all been teleported out of the competition. Looking at the reunion of his family, Liao Yuan's face was filled with regret. It's all my fault. I might know a person for a long time, but I still asked him for help even though I knew he was from the Quanjin sect. Adorable Tong and the others were also furious. Of course, they were not angry that Wang Yu had cheated Liao Yuan's blueprint. Instead, they were angry that Wang Yu was ruthless and didn't know how to hold back when dealing with women. Only the beautiful enchantress retorted, Liao Yuan, that's not right. Nyoga isn't that kind of person. Chapter 1560. Reason. Beauty Temptress thought for a moment, but she couldn't think of a reason, because he's strong. Liao Yuan was speechless. Strong fists made sense. This reason was unexplainable. Beauty Temptress might look fashionable, but she was a primitive woman who worshipped strength. Then, the Fruit Knight said, Brother Bull isn't like what you think. He must have his reasons for doing this. Oh, what reasons? The other girls gathered around and asked. You didn't die a horrible death. Why are you still covering up for a man who attacked women? Fruit Knight thought for a moment and said, We won't be able to make it out of Dragon Canyon with so many of us. It'll be a burden for him. If he runs alone, we won't be able to make it out of Dragon Canyon without a map. We might not be able to complete the quest, so sending us out early is good for us. Is that so? After listening to the Fruit Knight's explanation, Liao Yuan and the others who were still angry immediately quietened down. Although everyone still held a grudge against Wang Yu for killing someone, the Fruit Knight's words made sense. Liao Yuan was the team leader after all. After being reminded by the Fruit Knight, he quickly said, Looks like we've misunderstood Brother Bull. Oomph. Although the girls understood, they were still unhappy. Why didn't you just say it? Did you have to be so cruel? My face is still hurting. Liao Yuan stopped talking. After hanging out with the girl for so long, Liao Yuan naturally knew better than anyone else that women could not be reasoned with. In Dragon Canyon, Moonless Blossom and the others were shocked when they saw the number of players dwindle. In the end, there was only one person left in Wang Yu's group. They're all dead already? Golden Blossom was surprised. Boss, where's the quest item? The system loved watching players kill each other. This was a two-way quest, especially a quest like this, where the quest item had coordinates. Moonless Blossom opened the quest list and looked at the coordinates. He was shocked. They're still near the boss's nest. F***CK? No way, Golden Blossom said. Are the monsters in Dragon Canyon that strong? Even the boss couldn't kill them, but these monsters killed them in less than a minute? No, they haven't been wiped out yet. There's still one survivor. Moonless Blossom shook his head and said, Normal monsters can't be that strong. It's very likely that they were ambushed by the monsters after they exhausted all their supplies after they narrowly defeated the boss. Indeed, no matter how shameless the rebirth system was, it was impossible for it to design normal monsters to be stronger than the boss. Otherwise, such an anti-human setting would have been turned upside down by the players in the game headquarters. If there are any survivors, they won't be able to live for long. Should we chase after them now? Jean Rihua asked. Let's wait for a while. Moonless Blossom said, the exit must be guarded. If that kid really manages to get here and we're not here, wouldn't we have wasted our time here? He can run all the way here. The others could not help but laugh. His teammates are all dead. How can he run all the way here alone? Boss, you're too cautious. What do you know? Moonless Bloom said. Have you forgotten who's in their team? Hearing Moonless Bloom's words, Jean Rihua and the others could not help but be stunned. Wasn't that right? Although Burning Prairie's group was not well known, Wang Yu was a bona fide champion of the Chinese server's professional league. In terms of competition, the Chinese server was ranked among the top in the entire world. The strength of the champion of the Chinese server's professional league would naturally not be too exaggerated. As the saying goes, those who are famous are not just for show. With such a great reputation, if he didn't have some skill, he would have been beaten to the ground a long time ago. After all, this was a virtual world. Let alone fighting, no one would even look into murder. Then let's wait. Everyone was helpless. They could only sit at the exit and continue to wait. Jean Rihua also stared at the number of people remaining in the scene, thinking about how long Wang Yu could last before he died. Moonless Bloom, on the other hand, was staring at the coordinates of the quest item. His other hand was unfurling the map, marking the coordinates of the quest item bit by bit. It had to be said that although these Koreans were arrogant, they were still very cautious against their opponents. Experts really had their reasons for succeeding. Just now, with Burning Prairie's group around, although Wang Yu could fly, he had to lead the way, so he had to slowly walk with Burning Prairie and the others to the boss's nest. Things were different now. Without Burning Prairie's group, Wang Yu completely let go of himself. He spread his wings and flew into the sky, starting to walk in a straight line. A labyrinth, right? It did not exist in front of the flying Wang Yu. The Dark Demon Dragon was an earth dragon. If it could not fly, its subordinates naturally could not fly. Under the angry roars of the monsters on the ground, Wang Yu flew all the way to the exit. Wang Yu was in a very good mood. After hanging out with Chuanjin's people for so long, it was inevitable that he would be infected with some lowly mentality. For example, right now, Wang Yu liked the look of someone who wanted to hit him but could not. The map of Dragon's Canyon was quite large. Even though Wang Yu walked in a straight line, he only reached the center of Dragon's Canyon after flying for a full 7 or 8 minutes. At this time, Golden Sunbloom, who was at the exit, was waiting anxiously. This guy's pretty good. It's been almost 10 minutes, and he's still not dead. Boss, where is he? Golden Sunbloom could not help but nudge Moonless Bloom. However, Moonless Bloom looked at the coordinates on the map with a serious expression. After a while, he said, the quest item's coordinates are now at the center of Dragon's Canyon. That fast? Golden Sunbloom asked in disbelief. Dragon's Canyon is not small. Even if there are no monsters chasing after him, with these twists and turns, there's no way he could reach the center so quickly. No. Moonless Bloom shook his head. He did not walk through the labyrinth at all. Then how did he walk? Golden Sunbloom was puzzled. Could he have flown? That's right, Moonless Bloom said. That guy might really have flown. As he said that, Moonless Bloom placed the map in front of Golden Sunbloom. Then, with a swipe of his finger, he connected the coordinates that he had just drawn. It was a straight line. How is this possible? Golden Sunbloom said in shock. Isn't that Iron Ox a Grandmaster of Combat? How could he fly? Chapter 1561. Mage? I see. Everyone nodded in understanding and said, this will be much easier to deal with. Before this, Moonless Blossom's group had seen Wang Yu's party and knew that there were only 2 males in Wang Yu's party. Other than Wang Yu, the Grandmaster of Combat, the other male player was Liao Yuan. Liao Yuan, carrying a bow and quiver, was definitely not a mage, so the mage had to be one of the girls in the party. Although the stats of males and females were equal in the game, in terms of combat, to be honest, there was still a gap between male and female players. Therefore, most female players in Rebirth played clerics that were not good at PvP. Even for clerics, the best players were mostly male. This showed the gap between male and female players. If it was Wang Yu, everyone might be a little wary of him because of his title as the champion of the professional league. As for the girls, they were all top-tier experts, so there was no reason for them to be afraid of a girl. Then let's wait. The originally impatient group calmed down once more. After all, the opponent could fly. Even if it was a girl, they could not afford to be careless. If they left the exit and the opponent escaped, it would be very unjust. Flight was like a bug in a scenario where there were no flying monsters. 10 minutes later, Wang Yu flew near the entrance without any obstructions. Wang Yu's body was burly, so he was a big target. Plus, his wings were very eye-catching in the air. As soon as they reached the entrance, Moonless Blossom's group noticed Wang Yu in the air. When they saw Wang Yu soaring in the air, everyone was stunned. Damn, didn't they say it was a girl? Why did this girl look so fierce? Even Moonless Blossom was a little stunned. Moonless Blossom was an experienced expert. It was not like he had never seen Flight before, but it was definitely the first time he saw a Grandmaster of combat with Flight. Just as Moonless Blossom and the others were stunned, Wang Yu had already flown above them. Moonless Blossom saw this and immediately ordered, "What are you guys waiting for? Archers, shoot him down." Oh. After receiving Moonless Blossom's order, the archers under him came back to their senses. They hurriedly knocked their arrows and fired at Wang Yu. Wang Yu's senses were very sensitive. Before he entered everyone's line of sight, Wang Yu, who was in midair, had already felt the murderous aura coming from below. In the face of Moonless Blossom and the others' ploy, Wang Yu only smiled slightly, unhurriedly retracting his wings. Without the ability to float, Wang Yu's speed of descent suddenly increased. This sudden burst of speed allowed him to dodge the arrows. At the same time, the mage's icicle shot towards Wang Yu's face. Wang Yu lowered his feet and used Eagle Stamp, increasing his descending speed once again. Wang Yu dodged the spell and stomped on Moonless Bloom's head. Of course, Moonless Bloom and the others were also experts. Seeing Wang Yu coming for them, Moonless Bloom naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for death. Duong, duong, duong. A muffled sound. Before Wang Yu's Eagle Stamp could land on Moonless Bloom, he raised his left hand and raised a giant shield over his head, blocking Wang Yu's Eagle Stamp. However, Wang Yu's kicks and punches were heavy and had high priority. Even though Moonless Blossom's shield had managed to block Wang Yu's Eagle Stomp, his body had still been shaken by Wang Yu's 3 kicks. The lower part of his shield had been stomped into the ground, and Wang Yu had also fallen to the ground. Crack! There was a sudden clap of thunder, and a ball of lightning appeared under Wang Yu's feet. Seeing this, Moonless Blossom knew that this lightning bolt was not to be trifled with. He could not help but feel shocked. He hurriedly pushed his shield forward, placing it between the two of them. At the same time, Wang Yu's foot landed on the shield. Dong! Another loud noise rang out. Wang Yu's Thunder Stamp landed right in the center of Moonless Bloom's shield. Wang Yu had a full set of godly equipment, and his stats were incomparably high. This kick had high priority, and Thunder Stamp was a powerful knockback skill. Let alone a player, even a boss would be sent flying by Wang Yu's kick. One could only imagine the consequences of Moonless Bloom's kick. Everyone heard a thunderous sound as Moonless Blossom was sent flying back more than 10 meters by Wang Yu's kick. Golden Sun Blossom and the other players were immediately dumbfounded. Golden Sun Blossom and the others were all Moonless Bloom's underlings. As the so-called team leader, Moonless Bloom's strength was unquestionable. Everyone knew how powerful his equipment was, and yet such an expert had been sent flying with a single kick. Just how high did his priority have to be? Fuck. After reacting, Golden Sun Blossom couldn't help but exclaim, "This guy's that strong?" Nonsense. Moonless Bloom said unhappily, "Do you think the champion of the professional league is weak? Everyone attack. Surround him." As he spoke, Moonless Bloom stood up, raised a shield, lowered his head, and charged at Wang Yu. But at this moment, Wang Yu suddenly grabbed behind him. The air behind Wang Yu twisted, and an assassin who was using backstab was pulled out of the air by Wang Yu by the wrist. Wang Yu flipped his hand, snatching the assassin's dagger. He then casually threw the assassin and the dagger away. Pucci! The dagger drew an arc in the air, stabbing into the head of the mage in front of him. The mage didn't even have time to groan before turning into a streak of white light. The assassin was quite large, so he naturally couldn't fly far. Instead, he hit Moonless Bloom, who was already not far away from him. Boom! Moonless Bloom and the assassin collided, and the assassin was sent flying by Moonless Bloom's head. Moonless Bloom also crashed into his companion, and his skill was forcibly interrupted. After the assassin landed, he rolled backward and disappeared next to Wang Yu. F***CK. When the others saw Wang Yu forcibly pull the assassin out of the air, they were shocked once again. What the F***CK was that? Didn't they see this kid stare when he landed? How did he know that there was someone behind him? Could it be that he was cheating? Moonless Bloom's heart skipped a beat. Without another word, he raised his middle finger at Wang Yu and used a taunt. Wang Yu was directly pulled over. Wang Yu took a step forward, activating his internal breath to get rid of his crowd control status. At the same time, he leaned forward and used his shoulder to block the air. The assassin who had just moved forward was sent flying by Wang Yu's Iron Mountain backrest for the second time. But this time, the assassin wasn't as lucky as the last time. Last time, Wang Yu had only blocked Moonless Blossom's attack, so she hadn't used any strength in her attack. Moonless Blossom was a tank, so the assassin hadn't suffered much damage. This time, however, Wang Yu had directly used a skill, and it was a strengthened version of the skill. One could imagine the outcome. Wang Yu's Iron Mountain backrest rammed over, and the assassin instantly turned into a streak of white light. Chapter 1562. In the next second, the assassin was teleported into the Dragon Fortress. Looking at his comrade who had been killed by Wang Yu with his dagger, and then at himself, the assassin was dumbfounded, as if unable to process what had just happened. In fact, it was not hard to understand the assassin's current mood. The assassin class was the mainstream PvP class in Rebirth. It had always been said that they were invincible as long as they were in stealth. As long as they did not have any anti-stealth equipment, assassins basically had no natural enemies in wild PvP. Even if they encountered a tank class, they could still turn and run if they could not win. Grandmasters of Combat were in an awkward position. They had always been a unit of measurement in the game. There were many sayings, such as an assassin being equivalent to 10 Grandmasters of Combat, and a priest being equivalent to 5 Grandmasters of Combat. It was clear that the status of Grandmasters of Combat was low, and their value could not be compared to other classes. However, this assassin had been seen through by a Grandmaster of Combat twice in a row, and then killed with a single punch. Such a strange reality was hard to accept, and it was reasonable that his reaction was half a beat slower. At the same time, in the Dragon Canyon, Moonless Blossom and the others could not help but gasp when they saw Wang Yu instantly kill 2 experts with just a raise of his hand. Damn, there were only 6 people in this party. Excluding the tank and healer, there were only 4 damage professions. In just one exchange, he had already killed half of their damage. This professional league champion really lived up to his name. One had to know that the assassin and the mage were experts among experts. It would be an exaggeration to say that they could fight 100 alone, but they could still fight 10 alone. However, such experts did not survive for even a second under Wang Yu's hands. It was clear that his opponent's strength was far beyond everyone's imagination. After all, everyone was in the same party. In terms of strength, disregarding the class restraints, they were evenly matched. The experts would not be too much stronger, and the weaker ones would not be too much weaker. If Wang Yu could instantly kill others, it would be a piece of cake for him to do so. Moonless Blossom and the others were considered slightly famous professional experts in Korea. After playing the game for so many years, it was the first time they had met someone as troublesome as Wang Yu. Seeing Wang Yu charging toward him, Moonless Blossom said with a serious expression, our opponent is a tough one. Everyone be careful." Moonless Blossoms raised his shield, shielding everyone behind him. Jin Ri Hua Kai casually waved his hand, and an ice wall rose out of thin air, blocking in front of Wang Yu. Although a mage's ice wall did not deal any damage, its defense was extremely high. Golden Sunbloom was a top-tier expert, and his ice wall was much stronger than ordinary players. The ice wall was more than 10 meters wide and 7 to 8 meters tall. It completely blocked the path to the exit. At this time, the archers behind Jin Rihua Kai drew their bows and aimed at Wang Yu. A series of arrows pierced through the ice wall and flew towards Wang Yu's face. How shameless! Seeing his opponent's arrows shoot through the ice wall, Wang Yu couldn't help but complain. Of course, although this was illogical, it was not strange. After all, this was the game world, and anything was possible. There was no damage to the same party, and the archer's arrows could pass through the ice wall to attack the enemy on the other side. Who could find fault with this? This was just Wang Yu, who seemed to be using cheats. Calling others shameless was the real shameless one. Faced with the arrows flying towards him, Wang Yu's hands crossed in the air and caught a few of them. Then, he swung his left hand at the ice wall. Shing! With the sound of ice breaking, the arrow was stuck in the ice wall by Wang Yu. Then, Wang Yu leaped onto the arrow, and with another wave of his right hand, he stuck another arrow into the ice wall. Wang Yu, on the other hand, jumped over the ice wall 3 times as if he was waiting for a ladder. Actually, Wang Yu had Qinggong, and he also knew how to leap over eaves and vault over walls. Jumping over the ice wall was a very easy task, so sticking an arrow in was unnecessary. Would it be faster this way? No. This would allow the author to write more words. Actually, it would be more handsome, more visually impactful, and could be used to control the target in the later stages of the game. For example, Moonless Blossom and the others, when they saw Wang Yu's ability, they were so scared that they wet their pants. If Wang Yu had jumped over the ice wall directly, everyone would have been shocked, but they would still be able to maintain their calm, because everyone knew that Wang Yu could fly. However, the way Wang Yu caught his opponent's arrow and stuck it into the ice wall to use it as a ladder had completely changed the worldview of Moonless Blossom and the others. Holy **T. Can a game be played like this? Are the Grandmaster of Combat skills this bad? Just as Moonless Blossom was dumbfounded, Wang Yu had already jumped over the ice wall. Lightning flashed under his feet, and with a thunder stomp, he kicked Moonless Blossom's head from above. **CK. As the only player who could fight Wang Yu head-on for 2 rounds and survive, Moonless Blossom had a very deep impression of Wang Yu's judgment. Just now, he had been kicked 10 meters away while holding up his shield. If he were to use his head to receive the skill now, the result would be obvious. However, by the time Moonless Blossom reacted, Wang Yu had already descended from the sky. In that moment of shock, Wang Yu's big foot flew towards Moonless Blossom's face. He wanted to raise his shield to defend, but it was too late. Just as Moonless Blossom thought that he was about to be kicked to death by Wang Yu, a white light suddenly descended from the sky. The cleric at the back cast a holy light shield on Moonless Blossom. Moonless Blossom couldn't help but be overjoyed when he saw the invincibility state on his body. He was just about to rejoice that he had tricked Wang Yu into using a skill. However, at that moment, Wang Yu's legs tilted, and he swept over Moonless Blossom's head. Before Moonless Blossom could understand what was going on, Wang Yu suddenly pressed his hands against his head, and with a fierce push, he used the momentum to fly several meters away and kicked Moonless Blossom in the chest. Bang! There was a flash of white light, and Moonless Blossom chased after his comrade. Only a cleric and an archer remained behind Moonless Blossom. The archer dodged backwards to increase the distance between them and raised his hand to counterattack. Wang Yu's body crouched as he landed, and without any hesitation, he flew close to the archer like a low-flying cannonball. His right hand reached out and grabbed the archer's ankle, and he pulled back ferocious tiger strike. Ayaya! The poor archer felt the world spin around him before he could even catch a glimpse of Wang Yu's figure. In the next moment, he was caught in Wang Yu's hands. Wang Yu spun the archer a few times in the air and then loosened his grip. The archer in his hand flew out, and the nearby cleric fell to the ground. Wang Yu followed closely behind, and he descended from the sky, stomping both of them to death with 1 foot each. The white light under his feet shone on Wang Yu's face, and Wang Yu's face turned deathly pale. He looked like an Azura from hell. Chapter 1563. Coward. It was a very rare word in the game. After all, everyone knew that this was just a game. Even if you died, you would be resurrected. Therefore, no one would laugh at you if you were killed, but if you were cowardly, you would definitely be ridiculed. Dugu Jiuqiang was one of the rare player-controlled castellans in the game. He was considered an expert, and he had a strong team under him. He could be said to be a force to be reckoned with. Why was he ridiculed by the people of Qianjin? It was because Dugu Jiuqiang had been cowardly in the past that he became a laughingstock in the hands of the people of Qianjin. Even now, he was still ridiculed by Wuji and the others as Dugu Songxin. Even Dugu Jiuqiang was like that, let alone ordinary players. It was clear that cowardice was a taboo for gamers. However, as a professional expert, Moonless Blossom was cowardly at this time, and he was completely convinced of his cowardice. 5 professional experts, although they were not the top gods in the industry. As players from the strong, competitive country of Korea, the 5 of them were still worthy of praise. However, facing the Grandmaster of Combat in front of them, Moonless Blossom and the others felt powerless. From the moment Wang Yu appeared to the moment the 5 were killed, less than half a minute had passed. 5 people were killed in half a minute, and all of them were top-level experts. What kind of concept was that? It was clear that this was no longer a battle, but a crushing of strength. To be able to crush a professional expert with his strength, it was clear that Wang Yu's ability was far above that of a top-level expert. Such a ruthless person was no longer someone that players could stop. Against such a terrifying creature, who would not be afraid, let alone Moonless Blossom? An entire city of players in Yuhuicheng had been shrouded in this shadow before. Moonless Blossom's current mentality was only that of a beginner Yuhuicheng player. After all, only by being killed by Wang Yu a few more times, or seeing Wang Yu kill others a few more times, would they slowly get used to Wang Yu's strength that was above all other players. He, looking at Moonless Blossom, who had lost his will to fight and was trembling in fear, Wang Yu could not help but ask with a smile, "I'm really sorry for making you guys wait here to die. You must be getting impatient." Although Moonless Blossoms didn't understand Wang Yu's words, he could hear the mocking tone in Wang Yu's voice. As a professional player, he still had his pride. Even if his skills were inferior to others, he was unwilling to be mocked like this. When Moonless Bloom saw Wang Yu's mocking expression, he immediately raised a shield and pounced over without saying a word. Quite tenacious. Seeing that Moonless Blossom still dared to retaliate, Wang Yu naturally would not let him off. Wang Yu leaned to the side slightly, avoiding Moonless Blossom's charge. Moonless Blossom was clearly not a weakling. After missing, he immediately canceled the skill, turned around, and swung his shield to receive the shield bash, smashing it towards Wang Yu's side. Yo! Wang Yu was surprised that Moonless Blossoms could react so quickly and follow up with a combo. Wang Yu had seen his fair share of experts. Among shield warriors, Wang Yu could count on one hand the number of experts that could react as quickly as Moonless Blossom did. It was no wonder that Moonless Blossom had been so arrogant before. It was clear that this brat was not without confidence. Of course, in the eyes of an expert like Wang Yu, this was all there was to it. Faced with the incoming shield, Wang Yu suddenly accelerated, leaving an afterimage in his wake as he spun from the other side of Moonless Blossom to behind him. Moonless Blossom's shield bash smashed into thin air. After missing his attack, Moonless Blossom's figure swayed slightly. He took the opportunity to extend his leg to kick Wang Yu, who was behind him. In the end, Moonless Blossom's leg was only halfway through his kick when Wang Yu stepped on his calf. Moonless Blossom's legs went limp, and he lost his balance. At the same time, Wang Yu extended his hand, grabbed Moonless Blossom's hair, and pulled him back. His knees came together, and he placed Moonless Blossom's head on his knees. Then, Wang Yu held the back of Moonless Blossom's head with his left hand, while his right hand raised a fist the size of a sandbag and heavily punched Moonless Blossom's head. 14332-15221-13224. A string of damage values floated above Moonless Blossom's head. It had to be said that, as a shield warrior, Moonless Blossom definitely had the highest HP of any player that Wang Yu had ever seen. Moreover, his armor was like a tortoise shell, and his defense was incredibly high. Right now, Wang Yu was just a normal DPS. His damage and priority weren't high, but he was extremely rhythmic. Although Moonless Blossom was already struggling with all his might, every time he was about to use his strength, Wang Yu only needed to slightly loosen his grip on his head, and Moonless Blossom's strength would be neutralized. At the same time, the rhythm of Wang Yu's right fist would be interrupted. The pitiful Moonless Bloom struggled at first, but after struggling twice to no avail, he gave up and allowed Wang Yu to land one punch after another on his face. At this moment, Moonless Blossom had already seen through life and death, and he only hoped that Wang Yu would give him a quick death. Just like that, Wang Yu punched him more than a dozen times in a row, and Moonless Blossom's HP was completely emptied. He turned into a ball of white light and disappeared from Wang Yu's hand. Mother asterisk Kerr. Wang Yu swung both his hands and said gloomily, "This tank class is really tough." Meow. If anyone else heard this, they would probably die of anger. Moonless Blossom was a top-tier tank with more than 200,000 HP, and he was also fully equipped with top-tier equipment. This kind of guy could take a few waves of attacks in a group of people, and Wang Yu was just a normal DPS, and Moonless Blossom was crushed to death with a dozen or so punches. With this kind of DPS, he actually complained that the opponent was tough. He really one-shot people too many times, and did not treat others as human beings. Inside the Great Dragon Castle, Burning Prairie's 6-man party and Moonless Blossom's 6-man party had all been sent out of the Great Dragon Canyon. They were a family, after all, so they had to be neat and tidy. Seeing that Moonless Blossom was the last to be sent out, there was a loud applause in the Great Dragon Castle. How did you guys die? Burning Prairie's personality was also very despicable. Seeing that Moonless Blossom and the others had all died, he walked over with a smile and asked Golden Sunflower, even though he already knew the answer. "Oomph," Golden Sunflower said unhappily. "It's that Grandmaster of Combat." "Ha!" Hearing Golden Sunflower say that, Burning Prairie's originally gloomy mood instantly improved. Golden Sunflower was also puzzled. "How did you guys die? How did you guys die so quickly?" Hearing that, Burning Prairie was stunned, and the smile on his face gradually froze. With a bitter face, he said, "Mother asterisk Kerr, we were also killed by that Grandmaster of Combat." Hearing Burning Prairie say that, the players on both sides looked at each other and lowered their heads in unison, not saying a word. Okay, a total of 13 people had entered the canyon, and 12 of them had died at the hands of Wang Yu. This guy was practically a *King beast. When he went crazy, he would not even let his own people go. Chapter 1564. Swoosh. Just as everyone was silently cursing Wang Yu for being heartless, there was a sudden flash of light, and Wang Yu also appeared in the giant dragon castle. Seeing Wang Yu, everyone was shocked and gradually quietened down. Wang Yu looked around, and seeing the two harmonious parties, he could not help but say, "Hey, you guys seem to be chatting happily? What are you guys talking about?" "No, nothing." Liao Yuan and Golden Sun Bloom waved their hands in unison and took 2 steps back. What a joke. Everyone had just fought with Wang Yu, and everyone had a basic understanding of how strong Wang Yu was. *CK. With the relationship between Wang Yu and the dragons, if he found out that they were talking bad about him, with his strength and cruelty, no one could stop him if he wanted to kill them. TSK. This is ridiculous. Wang Yu curled his lips and casually threw the box to Liao Yuan, saying, "Here, your box. Brother Neo, *_*. Liao Yuan took the box, so excited that tears were about to fall from his eyes. After all, after what had just happened, anyone would inevitably have doubts. Liao Yuan was no exception. He thought that Wang Yu was going to take his item for himself, and now that Wang Yu had returned it to him, one could imagine Liao Yuan's mood. Moonless Blossom and the others were not in such a good mood. Liao Yuan's party was not weak, but compared to regular professional players, they were still lacking. They might even be a little weaker than Xuanjin. Although they had defeated professional players a few times, it was only by coincidence, and it did not mean that professional players would stoop so low. After all, Uncle Neo was a bronze dog, and he had even angrily defeated a king of Legends passerby in LOL. Therefore, with the strength of Moonless Blossom's party, it was a piece of cake to snatch the blueprint from Liao Yuan's party, who had just defeated the boss and escaped. However, a variable like Wang Yu had appeared out of nowhere. What was originally within their grasp had become something out of reach due to Wang Yu's existence. What was even more frustrating was that they were completely unable to defeat this person who had angered them to the point of gnashing their teeth. Moonless Blossom and the others had complicated feelings. Uncle Neo is invincible in the world. I have never experienced the feeling of not being able to defeat or provoke him. Everyone should have experienced it. You can put yourself in his shoes. Anyway, the only thing I can think of is being called for tea by the police. Will I be reported? After receiving the blueprint, Liao Yuan seemed to feel the burning gazes of Moonless Blossom and the others behind him. To prevent any unforeseen events, Liao Yuan casually passed the box containing the blueprint to Elder Manda. Elder Manda took the box and said with a smile, "Congratulations, my warrior. Your party has passed the trial." Then, Elder Manda waved her hand, and a ray of light scattered towards Wang Yu's party. Wang Yu's party suddenly emitted a ray of golden light. At the same time, they received a system notification. You have completed the trial quest. Level +1. As expected of the Dragon's trial quest, the amount of EXP was simply amazing. After level 60, the speed of leveling up was relatively slow. It would probably take an ordinary player half a month to level up. Liao Yuan and the others looked at their own levels and were extremely excited. They did not expect to receive such an unexpected reward from a blueprint quest. At this time, Manda turned to look at Moonless Blossom and the others and said calmly, "Warriors, although you have failed the trial, you cannot return empty-handed. This is a small token of my respect." As she spoke, Manda flicked her finger, and rays of golden light entered Moonless Blossom and the others' bodies. At this time, a title appeared above Moonless Blossom and the others' heads, Friends of the Dragons. When Moonless Blossom and the others saw this title, the displeasure on their faces dissipated a little. Although they did not receive the final reward, they had at least gained something. It could not be considered as drawing water with a sieve. The dragons were indeed a highly intelligent race that was no less inferior to the gods and demons. They did things in an orderly manner. After giving out the consolation prizes, Elder Manda held up the box that Liao Yuan had given him and began to chant. This should be the legendary dragon language magic. Following the incantation that was difficult to understand, a blue light wrapped around the box. Clack! With a soft sound, the lid of the box automatically jumped open, and a blueprint appeared in front of everyone. Everyone had gone through all kinds of hardships just for this blueprint. They were still very curious about what was recorded in the blueprint. Seeing the blueprint in the box, everyone subconsciously cast a detection spell on it, and the information of the blueprint immediately appeared in front of everyone's eyes. God and Demon Equipment, God's Grip, Riskguard Blueprint Precious Item. After using the forging method of the common God Equipment set, God's Grip can be obtained. Requirement: Advanced Blacksmith. God and Demon Equipment, Demon Subduing Boots, Shin Armor Blueprint Precious Item. After using the forging method of the common God Equipment set, God's Grip can be obtained. Requirement: Advanced Blacksmith. There were 5 blueprints in total. They were Riskguard, Shin Armor, Shoes, Clothes, and Helmet. The blueprints were almost the same, so I did not copy them. After all, Uncle Neo had always looked down on unskilled techniques. In short, these blueprints were blueprints for a high-grade god equipment set. In the equipment system of Rebirth, whether it was a set or a god equipment, they were all extremely high-end existences and had always been extremely rare. The most ordinary set or god equipment could only be found by chance. As for how precious this god equipment set's blueprint was, everyone could imagine. In short, the items in this box could only be described with one word: priceless. Not only Liao Yuan, Moonless Blossoms, and the others, but even Wang Yu was shocked when he saw this set of blueprints. Of course, Wang Yu was a man of principle. Although he knew that the box contained a priceless treasure, he did not regret returning the box to Liao Yuan at all. After all, for an old-fashioned person like Wang Yu, doing things was far more important than immediate benefits. Respected warrior, Manda handed the box to Liao Yuan with both hands and said, "You have passed the dragon's trial and obtained the right to use this set of god and demon equipment. I hope you can spread the spirit of the dragons to every corner of the world. May the Emperor be with you." As she spoke, Manda carefully placed the blueprint in Liao Yuan's hands. Liao Yuan took the blueprint and stuffed it back into his backpack without saying a word. There was no other way. When Moonless Blossoms and the others saw the blueprint, their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. They stared at the blueprint without blinking. If he did not quickly put it away, these guys would probably start snatching it right now. Chapter 1565. Seeing Liao Yuan put away the blueprint so cautiously, Moonless Blossoms snorted coldly and walked forward. "Elder Manda, we have nothing to say now that things have come to this. Please allow us to leave first. Warriors, take care." Manda spread her hands and nodded in agreement. Moonless Blossoms and the others glared at Liao Yuan and the others again before turning around and leaving. After Moonless Blossoms and the others left, Liao Yuan also stood up and said, "We'll take our leave too." As he spoke, Liao Yuan swiped his neck and turned into a white light, disappearing in front of everyone. Seeing Liao Yuan turn into a white light, Wang Yu was dumbfounded. It had to be said that Liao Yuan was really cautious. He actually chose to commit suicide on the spot. Thinking about it, Liao Yuan had treasures on him. Moonless Blossoms and the others were also eyeing him covetously. Liao Yuan was not Wang Yu, so he did not dare to stroll around the world. The drop rate of suicide was almost negligible. At most, he would lose some experience if he died. If he was intercepted and killed, he would probably lose more than just experience. "Nyoga, are you going?" Seeing Liao Yuan commit suicide so cleanly, the beautiful enchantress could not help but ask Wang Yu. "You guys go first." Wang Yu thought for a moment and said, "I still have something else to do." "All right." The girls nodded when they heard this. Then, they looked at each other and raised their hands to swipe their necks. Wang Yu and Liao Yuan were the main damage dealers in the team. If Wang Yu did not leave, Liao Yuan would commit suicide. The only damage dealer left in the team was the beautiful enchantress. It would be quite difficult to fight their way back to Dragon Island. Committing suicide and returning to the city was not the easiest and fastest way. After the girls committed suicide, Wang Yu was the only player left in the Dragon Castle. Manda sized up Wang Yu from head to toe and said respectfully, "Honorable warrior, is there anything else?" "Yes." Wang Yu nodded and said, "Your Excellency Manda, may I ask if you know about the dragon's reverse scale, Manda was shocked when she heard this. She looked at Wang Yu warily and said, "What do you want?" "Mission," Wang Yu said faintly. "Looking at your expression, you should know." "Got it." Manda nodded. NPCs could not lie. Although Manda did not know why Wang Yu was looking for the dragon's scale, she still nodded. "It's good that you know." Hee hee. Wang Yu chuckled when he heard this. He took out a big bag of money from his pocket and secretly stuffed it into Manda's hand. "Can you tell me where it is?" "This." Manda looked at the money bag in her hand and said awkwardly, "It's not impossible, but there are rules." "Tell me, this purse is also yours." Wang Yu raised his eyebrows and took out an even bigger purse. Wang had been dealing with this group of NPCs for a long time and slowly summed up a lot of experience. He was not afraid of these scammers being greedy, but he was afraid that they would not accept money. As long as he accepted money, it meant that there was a way. As long as he threw money at them, they would be able to speak. If he did not accept money, it meant that there was no way to discuss this mission. Even if he took out money, there would be no hint. Game designers were quite realistic on this point. As expected, when she saw the big bag of money in Wang Yu's hand, Manda revealed a satisfied smile and said with a smile, "You shouldn't ask us for the dragon's reverse scale." "Oh." Wang Yu frowned and said, "Aren't you a dragon? Who else would I look for if not you?" "Warrior, you don't know," Manda explained earnestly. "Although every dragon has something like a reverse scale, there's only one dragon that truly represents it, and that is His Majesty. You should look for yourself for this kind of thing." F***CK. Hearing Manda's words, Wang Yu's expression immediately darkened. "Damn it, I spent so much money to buy clues, but I didn't expect the clues to be on me." In the beginning, Wang Yu had thought of the Dragon Emperor Dales. However, the martial god was already a legend many years ago. It was also many years ago that he defeated the dragons and obtained the reverse scale. Therefore, the dragon's reverse scale should be a special item. He did not expect that it would really be on Dales. "Can you return my money?" Wang Yu asked. "You can even refund half of it." "Obviously no." Manda shook her head and looked at Wang Yu with a faint smile. Then, she looked at the surrounding dragons. She seemed to be saying that if he dared to mention money again, she would hurt their relationship. Wang Yu was not someone who cared about money. He just felt that he was being taken advantage of. He only asked if he wanted money. Seeing Manda's reaction, he immediately shut up. "Warrior, do you have anything else?" Manda asked again. The Dragon Castle has always been off-limits to strangers. Meow. It could be said that the NPC was an ungrateful wretch. He had just received the money, and the next thing he knew, he was asking Wang Yu to leave. One had to know that Wang Yu had been cheated of his money, and he was feeling upset. Now that he was being chased away, no matter how kind Wang Yu was, he was still a little unhappy. "There's no hurry." Wang Yu waved his hand and took out the Dragon Emperor token from his bag. "Your Majesty." Seeing the token in Wang Yu's hand, Manda and the other dragons' expressions changed, and they hurriedly knelt on the ground. "Oomph." Seeing that Manda was so flustered, Wang Yu felt a wave of comfort in his heart and casually clicked to use it. Creak. As the token in Wang Yu's hand flashed, the space above the castle was suddenly torn open by a golden claw. Immediately after, an unparalleled dragon might came from the other side of the spatial rift. Manda and the others climbed even lower. The spatial rift slowly opened, and Dales's big head poked out. He said impatiently, "Why are you looking for me, kid?" Hee. Wang Yu smirked and looked around at Manda and the other dragons lying on the ground. He said to Dales, "Old lie. Don't you think this place looks familiar?" "Eh." Dales was stunned for a moment before saying, "It does look familiar. Where is this?" "Your Majesty, you're finally free." Before Wang Yu could answer, Manda suddenly called out. Her voice was trembling. It did not sound like she was excited, but more like she was afraid. God knew what kind of tyrant Dales was back then. He actually scared his little brother to such an extent. "Oh, it's you." Dales glanced at Manda casually. He did not feel the joy of reuniting with an old friend. Instead, his tone was very calm. This surprised Wang Yu. However, it was reasonable. After all, the two dragons had not seen each other for thousands of years. When they met again, Dales had become someone else's servant. A dignified person like Dales would definitely feel ashamed and embarrassed to reminisce with an old friend. Manda opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but Dales asked Wang Yu impatiently, "Did you look for me just to disgust me?" "Huh?" Wang Yu was dumbfounded. "Forget it. Let's talk face to face." Dales extended his claws and dragged Wang Yu to the other end of the spatial rift. With a wave of his hand, he flattened the spatial rift. Chapter 1566. Dales was a dignified dragon, but he was also a flamboyant one. After Wang Yu was pulled into the spatial rift, the scene before him changed, and he found himself in a magnificent castle. The castles in the game all looked more or less the same, but for some reason, the castle Dales was living in gave Wang Yu a sense of déjà vu. Dales was the Dragon Emperor, a dragon with status. Even if Wang Yu was his master in name, Dales couldn't always show his true face in front of Wang Yu. After pulling Wang Yu to his side, Dales turned into a burly man again. He was sitting on a chair with his legs crossed, picking his teeth as he raised his chin and said, "Little Wang, give Nyogu some fruits." As soon as Dales finished speaking, a skinny, middle-aged man in a black robe floated in with a huge fruit platter. The middle-aged man looked very familiar. When Wang Yu saw the soul fire dancing in his eyes, he couldn't help but be stunned. Dominic, he didn't expect that old thing Dales to be so playful. Back then, he had captured Dominic so that he could be his servant. However, given Dales' status, it was a blessing for Dominic to be his servant. After all, the Dragon Emperor and the #1 expert of the 3 realms were there for all to see. How could an ordinary person be Dales' servant? At this thought, Wang Yu couldn't help but reveal a smug smile. Meow, being the servant of the #1 expert of the 3 realms was already a blessing. Being the master of Dales was naturally even more prestigious. Wang Yu was also immortal, so he had a little bit of vanity. Thinking of this made him feel very pleased. Oomph. Dominic glanced at Wang Yu, snorted, and ignored Wang Yu. Dragons were a proud race. Even though Dominic was now an undead, his pride still existed. In the end, Wang Yu hadn't defeated Dominic with his own hands. Instead, he had relied on Dales' reputation to intimidate Dominic in a handing over the key. Dominic was naturally filled with disdain towards Wang Yu. With Wang Yu's status, he naturally wouldn't hold a grudge against his servant. He pretended not to see Dominic's expression and asked Dales with a smile, "You didn't just rob them and take over their castle?" Seeing Dominic, Wang Yu recalled that this castle looked familiar because it looked exactly like Dominic's castle. "Umph, this old man is humble and refined. I am not that kind of person," Dales said disdainfully. "I only let him build a castle, that's all." Wang Yu was speechless. This Dales really wasn't a good person. It was one thing to rob a house, but he actually forced someone to build a new one for him. This grandson would have been beaten to death if he wasn't strong. What's wrong? Not used to living in a second-hand house. Wang Yu couldn't help but mock. "Isn't it all because of you?" Dale said unhappily. "Your mission is complete, so little Amy can't return to her original place to be a boss." Oh. Wang Yu nodded in understanding. There was indeed such a setting in the game. "Then is this the reason why you don't return to the Dragon Castle?" Wang Yu asked as he scratched the back of his head. Puffed. Hearing Wang Yu's words, Dale spat out the fruit in his mouth and hurriedly changed the topic. "Eat the fruit. I planted it myself. You know how to plant it?" Wang Yu glanced at the soft-hearted rough man in surprise. She casually picked up a grape and stuffed it into her mouth. The grape melted in his mouth, turning into a sweet juice that flowed into Wang Yu's mouth. At the same time, Wang Yu received a system notification. "You have consumed the grapes planted by Dragon Emperor Dales. Strength attribute permanently increased by 10. After receiving the notification, Wang Yu couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Wang Yu already knew about the attribute bonuses of food in Rebirth. After all, there were quite a few players who had the sub-profession of a chef. Wuji's wineskin and rice bag was one of them. However, ordinary food basically gave temporary attribute bonuses, and the medicinal effects were basically the same as potions of the same level. Something like plus 10% critical strike for 10 minutes, plus 30 to XX attributes for 30 minutes, and so on. Food that gave permanent attribute bonuses were indeed extremely rare. The only time he had seen it was when Wang Yu got a few pieces of dragon meat. After being processed by Wuji, everyone's intelligence attribute increased by 5 points. But that was dragon meat. It was reasonable to give permanent attribute bonuses. Dales' grape gave 10 points of strength, which was really surprising. Hee, how is it? It tastes good, right? Seeing Wang Yu's expression, Dale smiled and said, "Different types of fruits have different effects. However, this effect only lasts once." "Thanks." Wang Yu chuckled and stuffed the entire plate, along with the fruits, into her bag. Hey, don't be too much. The effect only lasts once. What's the use of taking so much? Dale said with a face full of displeasure. I'm different from you. I have a lot of friends. Wang Yu laughed. Wasn't that right? There were more than a dozen people in Xuanzhen. This plate of fruit probably wasn't enough to be shared. Fortunately, Wang Yu wasn't that kind of shameless person. If it was Wu Ji, that bastard, he would definitely ask Dales to pack a sack for him. If he couldn't finish it, he could still sell it. Fruits that gave permanent attribute bonuses were good stuff. Making the best use of everything had always been a fine tradition of Xuanzhen. Dales was speechless. All right, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you anymore. Why are you looking for me? Dales was also very helpless toward Wang Yu. When he first met Wang Yu was still an adorable young man. How long had it been since then? He had become so shameless. Dales was just showing off his harvest, but this guy actually ate it and took it without any hesitation. He couldn't scold him or beat him up, so Dales had to quickly get to the point, lest this guy wanted something else. I want something. Wang Yu wiped his mouth. What kind of thing do you want from me? Dales said disdainfully. You know, I'm a god. Mortal things have nothing to do with me. Dragon's reverse scale? As soon as Dales's voice fell, Wang Yu said indifferently, Damn you. Dales's figure swayed, and he almost fell from his chair. He stared at Wang Yu angrily and said, How dare you ask for everything? Why? You're not going to give it to me? Wang Yu looked back at Dales and said like a rascal, I know I can't beat you now. If you don't want to give it to me, I can't take it from you. But if you don't give it to me, I'll just kill myself. Let's die together. You. Chapter 1567. Mutual Destruction. This was not the first time Wang Yu had used this move. This was also the main reason why Dragon Emperor Dales was helpless against Wang Yu. When he heard Wang Yu's words, Dales felt a headache coming on. After all, if Wang Yu died at Dales's hands, Dales, as a follower, would also die. Wang Yu was a player who could revive. If he died, he would at most lose some experience. Dales, on the other hand, was one of the rare celestial bosses. If he died, he would die for good. Even if the game allowed respawning, the NPC's strength and respawning time were also proportional. Normal bosses could respawn after a day or a week. If a celestial boss like Dales died, the respawn time would be calculated in years. Dales's thoughts also had to follow the cycle. He naturally did not want to risk his life against Wang Yu. As long as it works, it's fine. Wang Yu laughed. Are you going to give it to me? I'm a god. Dales said proudly. Do you think you can perish together with me just because you're a human? Wang Yu also had a proud expression. I know what you're capable of. If a normal person wanted to kill you, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But you also know what I'm capable of. If I wanted to kill you, you wouldn't be able to escape. Dales was so angry that he was speechless. Wang Yu was right. Dales had personally experienced Wang Yu's abilities. At that time, Wang Yu was only around level 50. In terms of skills, he was no weaker than Dales. The reason why he couldn't beat Dales was because Dales had absolute suppression in terms of attributes. At that time, Wang Yu said that he wanted to perish together with Dales. Dales did not dare say that he could withstand it. Now that Wang Yu was already level 66 and had learned many skills, he was much stronger than before. How could Dales dare to be careless? A dragon's life was at stake. He had to be careful. He had no choice. When under someone else's eaves, he had no choice but to lower his head. Although it wasn't difficult for Dales to kill Wang Yu had a contract with him. Dales could only endure. Faced with Wang Yu's shameless behavior, Dales could only helplessly say, Boss, it's not that I can't give you my reverse scale, but the system has its own requirements. Just say it. Wang Yu spread his hands. Wang Yu understood the rules. After all, a dragon's reverse scale was an extremely special item. It would be ridiculous to give it away so casually. You have to gain my approval first, Dales said. Oh, Wang Yu said. What do I have to do to gain your approval? Logically speaking, you have to defeat me, Dales said calmly. Defeat you? Wang Yu's expression darkened. What was the difference between that and rejection? Dales was a level 200 celestial boss, one of the supreme existences in the game. Wang Yu was just a level 66 shrimp challenging Dales. Even if the system agreed to Wang Yu's request, the readers probably wouldn't be convinced. This was a documentary novel, after all. There were no cheats. I'm talking about me at level 100. Dales hurriedly added, but now we have a master-servant contract. Even if you want to challenge me, the system won't allow it. Then what do? Wang Yu's expression darkened. What was the difference between saying it and not saying it? How about this? Dales snapped his fingers. Little Amy, come here. Dominic heard Dales's order and quickly walked into the room. Dales pointed at Dominic. If you can convince him, I'll give you my dragon's reverse scale. What level are you? Wang Yu turned to Dominic and asked. Wang Yu had fought Dominic before. Although the kid wasn't as overpowered as Dales, he was still a powerful boss. He was almost 100 levels higher than Wang Yu. Wang Yu still didn't stand a chance against him. 185, Dominic said coldly. I'm now the Dragon Emperor's bodyguard. My rank is higher than before. Dales, are you messing with me? Are you forcing me to fight you to the death? Wang Yu glared at Dales. What the hell? To a player at Wang Yu's level, what was the difference between a level 185 boss and a level 200 supreme god? They couldn't even survive a single hit. I wouldn't dare. Dale was afraid that Wang Yu would break up with him, so he hurriedly came over and said, I'm talking about making him submit to you. I'm not asking you to defeat him. Oh, is that so? Wang Yu narrowed his eyes. He took out a pouch of money and stuffed it into Dale's hands. I didn't bring any gifts for my first visit. Take this. Can you give me some hints? Hee. Dales took the pouch of money and weighed it in his hands. Satisfied, he said, Dominic regrets being undead despite being a dragon's. He's been looking for a way to be reborn. If he can help him be reborn, he'll be convinced. Reborn? As a supreme god? You can't do it? Wang Yu was puzzled. Obviously, I can't. Dale shook his head. Give me the money. Wang Yu fiercely grabbed the pouch of money in Dale's hands and said angrily, If you can't do it, how can I? If you don't want to give it to me, just say it. Why are you making things difficult for me? Boss, calm down. Dales grabbed the pouch tightly. Do you know any players or NPCs who know how to resurrect? You can ask them to help. Players and NPCs. Wang Yu thought for a moment and asked, Dominic is undead now, right? Wang Yu knew a few players or NPCs who knew how to resurrect. Wuji was one of them. Knight of the Round Table Esther, as a believer of God, should know how to resurrect as well. However, both Wuji and Esther were believers of the God of Light, so their resurrection spells were also light magic. Everyone knew that undead was a type of dark magic. Light magic had a special restraining effect on dark magic. Dominic was an undead dragon. If Wuji or Esther cast a few light magic spells on him, he would probably be crippled in one wave. That's right. Dale sighed. If he wasn't undead, I wouldn't have such a headache. Resurrection is light magic. This guy is undead. How can I resurrect him? Wang Yu scratched the back of his head, his expression conflicted. Having played games for so long, Wang Yu had never encountered such a difficult problem. Unless you can find a way to resurrect him without light magic, Dales reminded him. Resurrection without light magic? Hearing Dale's words, Wang Yu seemed to have thought of something. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he exclaimed in surprise, I have an idea. What is it? Dales was also very curious about what Wang Yu wanted to do. Just then, Wang Yu took out a token from his backpack. The token was completely red and shaped like a bird spreading its wings. It was very lifelike. Chapter 1568. Hee. Good taste. Wang Yu chuckled, nodded, and clicked to use it. A red light flashed. Gotcha. At the same time, a space-time vortex appeared in front of Wang Yu. A few seconds later, it turned into a red portal. Then, a girl walked out of the portal. That girl was charming and had an excellent figure. She exuded an aura that looked down on the world. It was the flame monarch Nevis. After walking out of the portal, Nevis looked around blankly. When she saw Dales, the two of them looked at each other in surprise. They looked at each other and revealed surprised expressions. In the end, Nephi's gaze fell on Wang Yu. He frowned and asked Wang Yu, "Did you summon me?" "That's right, it was me." Wang Yu waved the phoenix token in his hand and replied indifferently, "Who are you? Why do you have my phoenix token?" Nevis looked at Wang Yu in puzzlement. Hearing Nephius's words, Wang Yu choked on a mouthful of blood. Damn, did the NPCs in this game have anything good? What did it mean to be ungrateful? He had only rescued Nephisto from the underground for a few days, and this bastard actually didn't recognize him. Meow, in any case, he was still his master, okay? I'm Iron Ox, Wang Yu said with a dark face. Did you forget who rescued you? Oh. Nevis curled his lips and said, "So it's you." Saying that, Nevis turned his head to Dales and said, "Yo, smelly lizard, long time no see. Why aren't you dead yet?" "Don't worry." Dales grinned, unwilling to be outdone, and said, "You old thing haven't died yet. I definitely won't die first." "Who are you calling old?" Nevis glared. After all, she was a female and hated the word old. But strictly speaking, Nevis had just hatched last month and wasn't even a year old yet. Indeed, she couldn't be described as old. As soon as the two met, the smell of gunpowder began to spread in the castle. Seeing that they were about to fight, Dominic instinctively slipped out of the door. What a joke. These two were real gods. If they fought, a sneeze from them could instantly kill the onlookers. Wang Yu was in a more tragic situation. These two lords were his followers. No matter who ran, Wang Yu couldn't run. After all, even if these two beasts were to fight, they wouldn't dare to do anything to Wang Yu. Moreover, with these two's abilities, if they really fought, it would destroy the heavens and the earth. He wouldn't be able to escape no matter what. Enough. When the subordinates were fighting, the boss had to show his support. Just as Nephius and Tull's verbal conflict was about to escalate into a physical conflict, Wang Yu shouted, "Shut up and listen to me." The two's quarrel stopped abruptly. The castle was instantly silent. Dales and Nevis stared straight at Wang Yu. Their eyes were filled with shock and anger. Obviously, these two had lived for thousands of years, and no one had dared to speak to them like this. It could be seen that Wang Yu's achievement of intimidating two god-tier bosses with just one shout was the best in the world. No one dared to surpass him. Wang Yu didn't care about that. He pointed at Nevis and said, "I didn't call you here to quarrel. You dare to talk to me like this?" Nevis frowned and said, "You don't want to live anymore. Try and touch me." Wang Yu rolled his eyes at Nevis. Damn, this guy was going against the heavens. Wang Yu didn't care about these two's attitude toward him, but they still didn't treat him like a human being. Wasn't this just asking for trouble? Not giving Wang Yu face was not giving face to the boss system. No matter how strong a boss was, if he dared to not give face to the system, there would only be one outcome. Freedom was precious, but life was even more valuable. Since he had already sold his body for freedom, he didn't want to lose his life for such a trivial matter. Seeing Wang Yu's unyielding attitude, Nevis was speechless. He was stunned for a long time before he gradually smiled and said, "Haha, Nyoga, I was just joking with you. What did you call me for?" "Small matter." Wang Yu pointed at Dominic outside the door and said, "This guy became an undead because of his passion for learning. Now he wants to be reborn. Give me away. You're an expert in resurrection. How can you let him be reborn?" "This." Nevis looked at Dominic and said, "This won't be easy." "What do you mean, not easy?" Dale said excitedly. "Nyoga, don't listen to her nonsense. It's fine as long as she's willing to give us a few drops of phoenix blood." "Dales, do you dare to fight with me outside?" Nevis shouted angrily. Nephisto's greatest ability was flying. The small space in the castle limited Nephisto's strength. Dales wasn't stupid. He raised his middle finger and provoked. "If you want to fight, fight here. I'm ready anytime." "Phoenix blood?" Wang Yu ignored the nonsense of the two and asked Nephius in bewilderment, "What is that?" Nevis glared at Dales and said unhappily, "Do you still need to ask?" "Of course it's my blood." "TCH." Wang Yu curled his lips and said, "I thought it was some treasure. You have so much blood all over your body. What's wrong with a few drops?" "What are you saying? This is my blood." Nevis immediately lost his temper when he heard Wang Yu say that his blood was like duck blood used in hot pot. Nevis was different from Dale's. Although Dale's abilities mostly came from his bloodline, he had also gone through some tempering. Nevis, on the other hand, was formed from the purest fire element in the world. He was the most powerful existence in the world since birth. As a natural divine beast, everything on Nevis' body had godhood. Not to mention divine materials like phoenix feathers, even a puddle of Nevis poop was a divine object to mortals. As for phoenix blood, it was something with Nevis' original divinity. It had the miraculous effect of nirvana rebirth. It was an unparalleled treasure. How could it be given away so easily? Not even one drop? In the end, Wang Yu was not like those bastards from Chuanjin. He still had a strong sense of morality. Seeing that Nevis treasured his blood so much, Wang Yu guessed that the value of this phoenix blood was no less than Dale's reverse scale. Therefore, he already had a pleading tone. No! Nevis shook his head. Not even half a drop. Nyoga. At this time, Dales came over and said, "This woman is looking down on you. Can you bear it?" "Forget it." Wang Yu waved his hand and said helplessly, "She has no obligation to give me her things. If it doesn't work, I'll find another way." "Don't." Dale said, "Why aren't you so polite to me? Let's die together." Chapter 1569. Dales grinned from ear to ear when he saw Nevis' frightened expression. Nevis angrily looked at Dales, then turned his head to stare at Wang Yu. His eyebrows were twisted into a knot. It had to be said that Wang Yu's shameless move was quite effective. Even arrogant fellow like Nevis was afraid when he heard Dales' words. Forget it. Wang Yu couldn't bear to see Nevis like this. "I'm not the kind of person who likes to force others." "Then why are you forcing me?" Dales was unconvinced. "It's because we're more familiar with each other." Wang Yu smiled. It couldn't be helped. Wang Yu and Dales had known each other for a long time, and in terms of seniority, Wang Yu should call Dales martial uncle. Dales was also a thick-skinned dragon, and his personality was quite compatible with Wang Yu. Therefore, the relationship between Wang Yu and Dales could already be considered as friends. Although Nevis was also one of Wang Yu's followers, Wang Yu and Nevis had only met once. Nevis was also very arrogant, so Wang Yu naturally couldn't be bothered to pay attention to her. Therefore, in this situation, the reason why Wang Yu could force Dales to do things was because the two had a good relationship. As for Nevis, Wang Yu couldn't do the same. "Damn, is it a crime to be familiar with you?" Dales said with dissatisfaction. "Quickly return my fruit to me. We're done with each other." "Ha ha." Wang Yu laughed, then turned to Nevis and said, "All right, you can go back. I'll think of another way." "Umph." Nevis rolled his eyes at Wang Yu and said, "Do you think I'll go back just because you tell me to? Why should I listen to you?" Wang Yu was a loss. Did this woman really want to fight with Dales? Just as Wang Yu was wondering what Nephius was thinking, Nephius suddenly stretched out a white finger and made a cut on his chest. A blood mark flashed as a drop of flame-like blood appeared on Nephius' finger. "Here." Nebulous handed the blood to Wang Yu with a red face and said, "You saved me. I owe you this drop of phoenix blood." After saying that, Nephius turned around and stepped into the teleportation formation without looking back. The teleportation array closed, and Nephius disappeared in front of Wang Yu. Wang Yu held the phoenix blood in his hands with a dumbfounded look on his face. What was going on? She didn't give it to him when he wanted it, and when she didn't want it, she forcefully gave it to him. Women's logic was really too strange. TSK, Sunder Dog. Dales once again revealed a disdainful expression as he gazed at the place where Nephius had disappeared. Phoenix blood, precious item, can be resurrected after use. Usage requirements, none. Item introduction. The divine blood of the flame monarch Nephius. It has the power of nirvana. After obtaining the phoenix blood, Wang Yu handed it to Dominic without hesitation. Dominic looked gratefully at Wang Yu, raised his head, and swallowed the phoenix blood. After swallowing the phoenix blood, Dominic screamed and turned into a colossal dragon. His body then began to change drastically. Originally, Dominic was just an undead colossal dragon. His body was dead, and there was no aura of life. After swallowing the phoenix blood, Dominic's body began to regenerate rapidly, and dragon scales that shone with a black light grew. The soul fire in his eyes also slowly dissipated, and they turned into colossal dragon eyeballs. In just a few seconds, Dominic turned from a lifeless undead into a mighty and majestic colossal black dragon. I've been resurrected again. Looking at his vibrant flesh and blood, feeling the blood flowing in his body, and listening to the beating of his heart, two streams of hot tears flowed down Dominic's cheeks. Wang Yu had never been an undead before, so she couldn't feel the hope brought by that vitality. However, seeing Dominic in this state, Wang Yu felt inexplicably moved. The birth of a new life was really easy to feel. Little Amy, Dales reminded her, your resurrection is all thanks to Nyoga. Your Excellency, Iron Ox. Hearing this, Dominic hurriedly returned to human form and knelt on one knee in front of Wang Yu. Dominic, will never forget this favor. System notice. You have obtained Dominic's recognition. All right. Wang Yu hurriedly waved his hands. I'm also doing this for a quest. Don't be like this. No matter what the goal was, the result was brought about by you. Dale smiled as he removed a necklace from his neck and handed it to Wang Yu. This is for you. Wang Yu took the necklace and cast Detect on it. Reverse Dragon Scale. Quest item. This is your reverse scale? Wang Yu asked curiously. He had thought that the reverse scale grew on Dale's neck. He didn't expect it to be a necklace. That's right. Dales let out a deep sigh. He gazed into the distance and said, this reverse scale was forcefully pulled off by Sir Martial God. I've been carrying it with me for so many years, remembering this humiliation. I didn't expect to meet you as soon as I was released. Sir Martial God has a good successor. He beat you up so badly. Don't you hate him? Wang Yu asked curiously. No, I respect him very much. Dale said sincerely. Wang Yu was fascinated. Although it was in the game, what kind of realm was the martial god in order to gain the respect of a powerhouse like Dale's? Perhaps in the game world, the players would never be able to reach this realm in their lifetime. Wang Yu had collected 3 of the 4 materials for the martial god's path. He had yet to obtain the glory of God. According to Antoine, the glory of God was in Sky Star City. It was formed by the divine spark of the god of light, and Sky Star City was in Korea. Like the 3 islands of Ingzhou, Korea was also a part of the Heroes continent, but it was an independent regional server. Korea was a peninsula that bordered the Heroes continent. However, because the regional server's route mission had not been opened yet, the Korea server and the local server could not interact. Of course, Dragon Island was an exception. Dragon Island was a special region, which was equivalent to a scene outside of each server. Every continent had a teleportation point to Dragon Island, but players would return to their home server after leaving Dragon Island. In layman's terms, Dragon Island was a cross-server arena. The reason why Moonless Blossoms and the others could stroll around Dragon Island was because of this setting. Now, it would be a little difficult for Wang Yu to go to Sky Star City. There was no direct train. Did he have to open up a route? It would be great if he could shatter the void like Dale's. Yeah, that's right. At this thought, Wang Yu's eyes lit up. He turned around and asked Dales, do you know about Sky Star City? I do. Why? Dales asked. Can you send me there? Wang Yu asked again. It's nothing. Dale smiled. He swiped his finger in the air and drew a spatial crack. Then, he tore open a teleportation door with both hands. Wang Yu waved at Dales and Dominic before stepping into the teleportation door. Chapter 1570. Korea's territory was much smaller than Japan's. Japan's 3 islands and 6 cities, together with the sea, were about the same size as a district in China. On the other hand, Korea only had a peninsula and 3 main cities. They were Sky Star City, and Sky God City. The Sky Star City was the largest main city among the 3 cities in South Korea. Although the Sky City and the Sky God City had arrogant names, they were far inferior to the Sky Star City. In the background story of Rebirth, Sky Star City was the place where the divine light god had fallen. Hence, Sky Star City was also known as the Holy Land. The NPCs, and even players in Korea, claimed to be the people of the divine light god. They firmly believed that Sky Star City was the center of the game's background, and the territory of Korea was the origin of the universe of Rebirth. Therefore, there was a saying in Rebirth that the origin of the universe was in Korea. As for whether it was true or not, who cared? Everyone had their own reasons to believe it. There was no tax on bragging. The Korean players even said that the entire Heroes continent was once the territory of Korea. What could anyone do about it? Dales was indeed one of the strongest players in the game. His teleportation through the void was even more effective than the teleportation circle. Wang Yu was directly thrown to the gate of Sky Star City by Dales. In the game's background, whether it was the 3 islands of Ingzhou or the peninsula of Korea, they were all the same as the Heroes continent. The architectural style was not too different. However, as the place where the God of Light fell, everything in Sky Star City was related to the God of Light. Everything was white, which made Wang Yu very uncomfortable. In the words of Wang Yu's hometown, the whole city was in mourning. Well, it was the place where the God of Light fell, after all. Although Korea was small, the online gaming industry was very developed. In terms of the number and quality of players, it was much more than Japan. As the largest main city in Korea, Sky Star City had hundreds of thousands of players. It was comparable to the main cities in China. It was the peak time for players. Players of all professions were entering and exiting the city gate of Sky Star City. It was very noisy and lively. The scene was no different from that of Yuhuicheng. Blending into the crowd, Wang Yu quietly slipped into Heavenly Star City. The layout of Sky Star City was roughly the same as that of Yuhuicheng. However, in the center of Sky Star City, there was a tall tower that towered into the clouds. Its imposing manner was unparalleled, causing people to keep a respectful distance from it. After entering Sky Star City, Wang Yu was immediately stunned. That old bastard Anshuan had only told Wang Yu that the glory of God was in Sky Star City, but he hadn't told Wang Yu where it was. The scale of the Sky Star City wasn't much different from the Heroes Continent's Saint Light City. Wouldn't it be like searching for a needle in a haystack to find a legendary item in such a huge place? It would be fine if the glory of God was in the city, but if it was in the wild, *CK, the wild map was many times larger than the main city. If he were to close his eyes and search, wouldn't he just find the game server? For a moment, Wang Yu suddenly felt what it meant to be helpless. Finding the item was also a problem that couldn't be solved by force. Helpless, Wang Yu could only send a message to Wuji. However, as soon as the message was sent, the system replied to Wang Yu, "Sorry, the user you have dialed is not in the service area. *CK. Looking at the system notification, Wang Yu was on the verge of breaking down. He had no choice. It definitely wouldn't work if he looked for it himself, and he couldn't contact external help either. He could only rely on asking now. However, he was unfamiliar with this place. Who would he ask? Wang Yu began to look around. Just as Wang Yu was looking around, an assassin and a warrior suddenly walked in front of Wang Yu with their arms around each other's shoulders. The warrior was burly and carried a giant axe on his back. The assassin was hunched and had 2 daggers in his thighs. The two walked together. Relatively speaking, the taller one was taller and the shorter one was shorter. It was very fitting for their profession. The bodies of these 2 people shone with a faint glow. It was obvious that their equipment wasn't weak. On their chests hung a badge with a golden flower. Wang Yu found it very familiar. As if sensing Wang Yu's burning gaze, when the 2 walked in front of Wang Yu, they involuntarily stopped and stared at Wang Yu with a look of displeasure. Being stared at while walking on the street wasn't a good experience. Moreover, the game was a world where swords would be drawn at the slightest disagreement. "What are you looking at? What are you looking at? What are you looking at?" You two. Seeing that the 2 were somewhat displeased, Wang Yu quickly smiled and said, "Have you heard of the glory of God?" Hearing Wang Yu's words, a string of question marks appeared on the 2's heads. It was obvious that these 2 did not understand what Wang Yu was saying. "What did you say?" In order to confirm, the warrior tilted his head and asked. This time, it was Wang Yu's turn to be dumbfounded. *CK. he was only thinking about asking for directions and neglected the problem of the language barrier. Since he couldn't even speak clearly, there was naturally no need to ask. Wang Yu sighed and cupped his fist at the two, saying goodbye. With that said, Wang Yu awkwardly walked to the side. As he walked, he asked questions in an attempt to find someone in Sky Star City who understood Mandarin. As for the two players who were asked by Wang Yu just now, they looked at each other in surprise. It could be said that Wang Yu was a noob in the game. Although Wang Yu had played the game for a long time, he only understood the basics of the game. As for the slightly more advanced rules and unspoken rules, Wang Yu was still in the dark and was still at the stage of doing things his own way. However, any veteran gamer would know that they must avoid asking for directions in an unfamiliar place. As mentioned before, the game world was a world with extremely low moral restrictions. After all, this world was virtual and no one would affect anyone when they went offline. Therefore, the evil side of the gamer would be greatly magnified in the game world. Take asking for directions, for example. It was simply a direct indication to the other party that they were a foreigner. In reality, foreigners would be ostracized by the locals when they first arrived. This was even more excessive in the game. Even if you were a local, as long as you had good stuff on you, you might be stabbed when you went out. Not to mention that you were a foreigner who was unfamiliar with the place. Asking for directions was basically equivalent to openly telling the other party, "I'm a fat sheep. Come and kill me." Moreover, the collective concept of the gamers in the game was very strong. From the most basic collective concept of guilds to the collective concept of main cities in the middle stage, and then to the collective concept of factions in the high stage. They were all manifestations of the collective concept of the gamers. The relationship between guilds and cities wasn't too outrageous, but the confrontation between factions was very obvious. Chapter 1571. Wang Yu's current situation was no longer as simple as a faction. It was completely above the three collective concepts mentioned above. From the perspective of a faction, it had risen to the level of a country. This was another collective concept that couldn't be violated. The game was the most simple and crude way of robbing resources. Every inch of land had the possibility of spawning a boss. Every inch of land had to be fought for, and any act of crossing the border could be considered an invasion. This was clearly stipulated by the system. Anyone who killed a player from another country would gain honor, reputation, and EXP. They could even obtain special merits to exchange for equipment from their mentors. The highest they could exchange for was a divine artifact. This further contributed to the tension between countries. Wars required money, and the game companies that were the happiest when it came to spending money were the arms dealers and suppliers. Therefore, national wars were the real weapon of high consumption. It was the ultimate method used by the game companies to stimulate consumption. Back in the days, there was a game company called sh*t something Zhu in the Chinese gaming circle. He relied on a game called something something 2 to become a top tycoon in the IT industry with the help of national wars. With the passage of time, things had changed. That game company might have ruined the gaming atmosphere, but his methods of making money were still passed down. No matter how high-tech Rebirth was, its goal was to earn money. Naturally, it put in a lot of effort into national wars. Ordinary players would be aware of this when they entered the game. Unless they had a strong background and strength, they wouldn't even dare to show off their good equipment. However, Wang Yu dared to ask for directions after leaving the local server. He really didn't care about the rules. Wang Yu's questions attracted the attention of the passers-by. Looking at Wang Yu's back, the warrior and the assassin couldn't help but look at each other. This person doesn't seem to be a player from our Sky Star City. What do you mean he's not a player from Sky Star City? The assassin pouted. I don't think he's from our country. Do you think he's from the Japanese server or the Chinese server? The warrior touched his chin and pondered. Who cares? The assassin took out his dagger and said, no matter which server he is from, we will get national war merits as long as we kill him. Calm down. The warrior pulled the assassin back and said, that kid can come to our Sky Star City from another server. Obviously, he isn't weak. We might not be his match. Not a match for him? Hee hee. The assassin sneered. Did you see his profession? Class. The warrior was stunned for a moment. I didn't pay attention. He's just a grandmaster of combat. How powerful can he be? The assassin said in disdain. If you don't go, I'll do it myself. The Grandmaster Combat was a famous sewer class. There was a saying, 9 out of 10 Grandmasters of Combat are useless, and the last one relies on his mouth. Assassins, on the other hand, have been the number 1 PK class since the beginning of Rebirth. Under normal circumstances, as long as one was not too weak, it would be easy for an assassin to defeat a Grandmaster of Combat. Moreover, this assassin had a full set of exquisite equipment and even dared to use special effects on the streets. His strength was obviously not too weak. Fighter? Hearing that, the warrior laughed and said, such a useless class, and yet he dares to be so high profile. This guy is obviously here to die. In all honesty, although Wang Yu was high profile, this definitely wasn't his intention. After the two of them finished talking, the assassin's body flashed and disappeared. He quickly followed behind Wang Yu. The warrior also took out his weapon from his back and held it in his hand as he followed behind the assassin. Everyone was a player. If the assassin could think of something, the others would naturally think of it as well. Wang Yu's high-profile behavior attracted a bunch of followers in no time. However, when these people following behind Wang Yu saw the warrior carrying the giant axe, they were all shocked. They slowed down and turned to leave. Obviously, these players were afraid of the warrior. He was even willing to give up on a national war merit. Wang Yu wasn't blind. On the contrary, Wang Yu's senses were different from ordinary people. Even without looking back, he could tell that there were many people following behind him. Although he didn't know what these people wanted, Wang Yu could feel that these people didn't come with good intentions. Of course, Wang Yu had always been bold because of his skills. Wang Yu had encountered this kind of situation many times. Over time, it had become a habit. Therefore, Wang Yu turned a blind eye to these people with bad intentions. However, after walking for a short while, Wang Yu suddenly felt that the number of players behind him was decreasing. In the end, there were only 2 people left. This made Wang Yu feel strange. After all, it was normal for more people to gather for a pursuit. It was a little abnormal for there to be fewer people. Just as Wang Yu was feeling puzzled, a small alley appeared not far away. Let's see what they are selling. Wang Yu snorted coldly and turned into the alley. Seeing that Wang Yu had entered a secluded alley, the warriors and assassins who had been following her were also stunned. This brat is really bold. Not only did he ask for directions on the street, he even went into a secluded alley. Does he really want to die? The assassin was puzzled. Be careful, it might be a trap. The warrior said cautiously, this guy is suspicious. I suspect that he is luring the enemy in. There's an 80% chance that there is an ambush in the alley. It had to be said that although the warrior looked burly, he was also a meticulous person. Of course, this kind of thing was not uncommon in the game. If you saw someone wearing exquisite equipment, you would pretend to be a noob and go up to talk to them. Then, you would lure them to a secluded area, and in the end, a group of burly men would jump out and kill them for their equipment. This kind of trick had been around since the beginning of the game. As a veteran gamer, he was naturally familiar with it. When the assassin heard this, he felt a little guilty and could not help but ask, then, should we still follow? Before the warrior could answer, Wang Yu suddenly poked his head out of the alley and shouted in the direction of the assassin, Hey, you two have been following me all the way here. Why are you guys chickening out? Hearing Wang Yu's voice, the warrior was startled and hurriedly took a step back, holding his great axe in front of his chest. The assassin was even more shocked and broke out in cold sweat. He quickly looked at his status and confirmed that he was in stealth mode. You can see me? Wang Yu could not understand the assassin's words, but he could still hear the surprised tone in the assassin's voice. He could not help but smile and said, I have already brought you guys here, and you still do not dare to do anything. Looks like you are also cowards. Boring, let's go. As he said that, Wang Yu looked at the two of them with disdain and walked out of the alley. F***CK. How dare you look down on us? From their equipment, it was not hard to tell that these two were also experts. They had never been looked down upon like this before. Seeing the expression on Wang Yu's face, the two's expressions immediately changed. They could not help but feel anger rising in their hearts, and they became even more daring. Chapter 1572. Just as the assassin's dagger was about to stab into Wang Yu's back, Wang Yu extended his hand behind him without turning his head. The assassin felt his hand sink. His wrist that was holding the dagger was tightly grabbed by Wang Yu. No matter how much strength he used, he could not stab forward. Immediately after, Wang Yu's hand that was grabbing the assassin's wrist slightly twisted. The assassin's hand that was holding the dagger loosened involuntarily, and the dagger fell to the ground. The assassin was shocked. He hurriedly rubbed his left hand on his thigh and pulled out another dagger. He aimed it at Wang Yu's back. However, at this moment, Wang Yu suddenly turned around and raised his hand to strike. The assassin's dagger had just stabbed halfway when Wang Yu's left palm had already reached the assassin's chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, the assassin felt as if he had fallen into a cloud. He lost his balance and was directly sent flying 4 to 5 meters away by Wang Yu's palm. Then, he fell heavily at the feet of the warrior. Wang Yu's attack was overbearing. Although this palm was only a normal attack, the assassin still only had 20 to 30,000 HP. Wang Yu's palm strike reduced the assassin's HP to a single digit. The assassin's face turned pale on the spot. Seeing this, the warrior beside him also showed a look of horror. As everyone knew, Grandmasters of Combat did not have weapon proficiency. The main advantage was that their skills had a short cooldown, which made it easy to chain skills and deal damage. Therefore, Grandmasters of Combat were very cool when they fought. They could beat people up to the sky with a set of skills, but their damage output was only SOSO. Therefore, Grandmasters of Combat were also famous for being flashy, but not practical. They were jokingly called the top masseuse in Rebirth. Although Wang Yu's palm strike looked simple and ordinary, it almost instantly killed the assassin with tens of thousands of HP. At this stage of the game, players had already perfected their equipment and skills. It was very difficult for players to instantly kill their opponents. Meanwhile, the assassin was a level 60 expert, and his equipment was considerably strong. Even so, the assassin had nearly failed to block a normal attack from Wang Yu. The assassin's damage was simply appalling. His normal attacks were already so overpowered. If he used a skill, wouldn't that assassin be instantly killed? What do you want? Seeing that the assassin's health had been reduced to a critical state by Wang Yu's palm strike, the warrior's entire body quivered. He held his great axe horizontally in front of the assassin, while his other hand pointed at the badge on his chest. Do you know who we are? Obviously, Wang Yu could not understand what the warrior was saying. Looking at the warrior's reaction, Wang Yu thought that the warrior was trying to provoke him. What kind of person was Wang Yu? The number 1 heaven and earth was a ruthless, homicidal maniac. He had always granted all the requests of those who wanted to die. He was known as Guanyin, the goddess of death. Seeing that the warrior was so sincere, Wang Yu once again displayed his virtue of granting all requests. He turned around and kicked the handle of the dagger that he had just knocked down. Whoosh! The dagger flew towards the warrior with the sound of the wind. The warrior was obviously not weak. He grabbed the handle of the axe with his left hand and lifted it up. Clang! With a soft sound, the dagger was knocked to the ground. At this time, Wang Yu had also jumped in front of the warrior. The warrior was shocked and quickly jumped back. Without waiting for Wang Yu to land on the ground, he held the handle of the axe tightly with both hands and swung it upwards. The great axe drew an arc in the air and slashed towards Wang Yu. Wang Yu smiled slightly. He stepped in the air and dodged the slash of the great axe. Then, he reached down with his right hand and grabbed the axe. He used Fierce Tiger Strike and pulled it forward. Aya! Being pulled by Wang Yu, the warrior's weapon almost fell out of his hand. He could not help but take 2 steps forward. At the same time, Wang Yu turned around in the air and kicked backwards with a thunder stomp. His big foot stepped right on the warrior's face. Thunder Stomp was the skill that Wang Yu was most familiar with. Apart from bosses, no one had ever been able to survive after being kicked by Wang Yu. Naturally, this warrior was no exception. Bang! With a flash of lightning, the warrior was instantly trampled into white light by Wang Yu. The great axe's hand also fell into Wang Yu's hand the moment it was kicked to death. Clatter! Wang Yu landed on the ground. He twisted his waist and swung his axe at the dagger on the ground. Puffed! There was another muffled sound. The assassin who was about to pick up the dagger and run away in stealth was chopped in half by Wang Yu's axe from the back. Fortunately, they were in the game, and the bloody effect was greatly reduced. With a flash of white light, the assassin's corpse disappeared, leaving only the dagger on the ground. Wang Yu held the axe in one hand and used grasping fist with the other. A white light rolled up, and the dagger fell into Wang Yu's hand. After looking at the attributes of the great axe and dagger in his hands, Wang Yu smiled in satisfaction. South Korea was indeed a powerful country in online gaming. He killed 2 random passersby on the street, and they actually got 2 dark gold weapons. To be exact, he snatched them. At this stage, the mainstream equipment for players was still gold. Dark gold equipment was a must-have for experts in the domestic server, especially large items like weapons. They were quite valuable in the market. This trip was not in vain. Even if he could not find the glory of God, he still made a profit. After putting away the 2 weapons, Wang Yu was in a good mood and continued to ask for directions. However, the 2 players at the resurrection point were already in an uproar. F***CK. You didn't run away? Seeing the assassin's name turn dark and then appear at the assassin's resurrection point, the warrior asked anxiously. No, the assassin said gloomily. That bastard cut me down from behind. What about my axe? Did you pick it up? The warrior saw the assassin's reply and asked cautiously, his heart turning cold. Pick up my axe. The assassin said angrily, I couldn't even pick up my dagger. Why would I pick up the axe? F***CK. Hearing the assassin's words, the warrior, who had been calm all this while, immediately panicked. A real man stood between heaven and earth. If he died, he would at most admit defeat. Experience was not valuable, but equipment being dropped was a big deal. After all, equipment was the most important real estate for any player. It was equivalent to a car in real life, especially when the 2 of them were dropped with 2 dark gold weapons. Large items like weapons were the most precious to players. Now that they were stolen, the warrior could not calm down no matter how calm he was. Go, get it back. As he spoke, the warrior stormed out of the resurrection point, dragging the assassin along with him as he went to fight Wang Yu. This time, the assassin had learned his lesson. After dying once, the assassin had obviously grown a brain, so he did not die in vain. The assassin struggled to break free from the warrior and said, Big brother, are you kidding? Do you think we can beat that bastard with our current state? The warrior quieted down and gave up on the idea of seeking death. Wasn't that so? Just now, the 2 of them had brought along weapons to ambush Wang Yu, but they were easily dealt with by Wang Yu. Now that both of their weapons have been snatched away by Wang Yu, wouldn't they be courting death if they went to look for Wang Yu now? It was possible that their other equipment would also be taken away by Wang Yu. Chapter 1573. Then we can only call for help now. Although they knew that they were no match for Wang Yu, the 2 did not decide to swallow their anger. After all, equipment could not be compared to other things. If they died once, these 2 fellows might admit that they were unlucky for the sake of their pride. After a few days, they could farm back their experience. However, if their weapons were stolen, it was not a matter of pride anymore. In desperation, the warrior thought for a moment, opened his friend's list, and sent a message to a player called Tulip. Boss, there's an emergency. Tulip was the leader of the Sunflower Guild in Sky Star City. There were many players in Korea, but the territory was small, so the players gathered together. Most of the players were in Sky Star City. Therefore, there were 4 or 5 large guilds with more than 10,000 members in Sky Star City, and the Sunflower Guild was one of them. Tulip was the only female player among all the leaders of the large guilds. See, this was the treatment of the main character. A random person on the street who asked for directions could provoke one of the most powerful guilds in the city. There was no other reason. Low charm, bad luck, and Xin could not change one's fate. Tulip was in the instance dungeon with the team. She had just defeated the last boss and was about to loot the corpse when she suddenly received a message. Tulip could not help but be slightly startled. "What's wrong, boss?" Reading messages in the game was still distracting. Seeing that Tulip did not move, the other players beside her could not help but ask. "Nothing." Tulip waved her hand and said, "Shan Kuei sent me a message saying that there's an emergency." "What emergency?" Everyone curled their lips and said, "Isn't this kid doing a mission with Hidden Ghost? He must have encountered some difficulty." "Boss, ignore him, or else he will need our help again." Hee hee. Tulip smiled slightly. She knew that these brothers were just joking and could not be taken seriously, so she casually replied, "What's wrong? What's the emergency?" Receiving the message, the warrior called Shan Kuei replied, "We encountered a player from another server in the city." "Another server? What do you mean?" Tulip asked blankly. After all, this kind of thing was extremely rare, and Tulip did not think about the Chinese server. "It's a player from another country," Shan Kuei explained. "The kind that can farm achievements." Achievements? A foreigner? Other things were hard to say, but things like merit points were still very intuitive. After all, there was only one way to obtain them. When Shan Kuei said this, Tulip immediately reacted and became excited. However, his excitement only lasted for a moment. He seemed to have thought of something and said, "European server or American server? We can't afford to offend the players from these two places." "An Asian," Shan Kuei said. "Oh, is that so?" Hearing Shan Kuei's words, Tulip happily asked, "Where is he now?" "It's right in the middle of the city. Hurry up and bring someone over. Otherwise, it'll be snatched away by the other guilds," Shan Kuei anxiously shouted. This worry came from the bottom of his heart. After all, achievement points could be used to exchange for godly equipment. The only way to obtain them was by killing players from other countries. Currently, the only foreign player in the game was Wang Yu. Major guilds were everywhere in Sky Star City. With Wang Yu's current death-seeking behavior, it was inevitable that he would be targeted by the other guilds. One had to know that the achievement points obtained from killing a player from another country was limited. If one wanted to farm for a godly equipment, they would have to kill Wang Yu at least 100 times. Whether Tulip could obtain achievement points or not wasn't important to Shan Kuei and Shan Kuei. The reason why they were so anxious was that their weapons were still in Wang Yu's hands. If Wang Yu was killed 100 times, he would probably lose all his equipment. When that happened, their weapons would become someone else's. This was what Shan Kuei and Shan Kuei were most worried about. "You guys keep an eye on him. We'll be there soon." After saying that, Tulip closed the message window and said to the people around her, "Everyone, clean up the battlefield. We have to hurry back." "What happened?" Seeing that Tulip was so anxious, the others asked in bewilderment. Faced with everyone's questions, Tulip only said 3 words, "Farming achievement points." Wow! Hearing Tulip's words, everyone was in an uproar. Everyone was a veteran player and naturally knew what it meant to farm achievement points. They didn't expect their luck to be so good as to encounter such a good thing today. Something like achievement points could be obtained by killing players from other countries. Therefore, in theory, it could be farmed without limit. Of course, the system wasn't a fool and naturally wouldn't turn a blind eye to this bug. However, with the system's remedial method, it would at most limit the number of times a day. But they weren't afraid. As long as they had the patience, even if it was once a day, everyone had the willpower to farm a godly equipment. Everyone had carried bricks in the dungeon before, so this was a small matter. If Tulip ate the meat, the others could at least drink some soup, right? At this moment, not only the elite disciples of the Sunflower Guild, but the other major guilds of Heavenly Star City also received this news. It couldn't be helped. Wang Yu's behavior was too high profile. Asians all looked the same. Although Wang Yu was more naturally handsome, who in the game could tell? As long as he didn't say anything, no one would know that Wang Yu was a foreigner. However, Wang Yu was asking for directions on the streets. This kind of behavior was basically short of holding a megaphone and shouting, "I'm not a local." How could other guilds not know? After receiving this news, the other major guild leaders' reactions were similar to Tulip's. They didn't dare to announce it in the guild channel. They only told a few core members and instructed everyone not to spread it. After all, the opponent was only Wang Yu, so it shouldn't be difficult to deal with him. Moreover, the fewer people who knew, the fewer people who would split the loot, and the easier it would be to farm. Otherwise, if more than 10,000 people went to capture a player, when the time came to farm merit points, no one would be happy if they didn't rank up. Wang Yu is only over level 60. The 10% EXP loss per level was only a few hundred times. The number of players who could rank up was far less than the players who couldn't. In today's society, there wasn't a lack of players, but a lack of distribution. If this angered other players, the guild wouldn't be able to play. Similarly, the news also reached the ears of the leader of the largest guild in Heavenly Star City, Golden Time. Golden Time's leader, Moonless Flowerless, had just returned from Dragon Island. He was physically and mentally exhausted, and he hated and feared the Chinese players. When he heard this news, he almost jumped up. What's going on? Is that player from the Japanese or Chinese server? As an expert who had seen the world, Moonless Flowerless was more apprehensive than the other guild leaders. Chapter 1574. I'm not sure, but I think he's from the Chinese server, the underling guessed. Oh, why are you so sure? Moonless Bloom asked curiously. The game was not reality. No matter how similar the character was to the player, it was still a little cartoonish. Therefore, the players in the Asian region all looked the same, and it was hard to tell them apart. The underling said it so naturally, which confused Moonless Bloom. Height. That guy is really tall. How can a Japanese be so tall? The underling said straightforwardly. Moonless Bloom was speechless. That's not necessary. The character's height can be adjusted in-game. The key is that he's not a tank class. Isn't it crazy for a Grandmaster of Combat to be so big? The underling said. In reality, having a big body meant having an advantage in fights. However, in the game, a player's attributes had nothing to do with size. Moreover, a big body meant a big target. Everyone had the same attributes, so the bigger the target, the easier it was to be hit. Therefore, other than tanks who specialized in taking hits, most other classes would try to make their characters as small as possible. Not only would it be harder to be hit, but it would also be easier to hide behind tanks. This was especially true for a weaker class like Grandmaster of Combat. They would not make themselves a big target unless they were big and were not used to being small. Grandmaster of Combat? Moonless Bloom was stunned when he heard it. Of course, Moonless Bloom was not shocked because of the Grandmaster of Combat's physique. It was because when he heard the words Grandmaster of Combat, a terrifying figure appeared in his mind. Chinese big body, Grandmaster of Combat, and arrogant behavior when asking for directions on the street. Moonless Bloom could not think of another person with these 4 points. Beside him, Golden Blossom was shocked when he heard the news. Boss, that Grandmaster of Combat is? Very likely. Moonless Flowerless nodded with lingering fear in his heart. It couldn't be helped. Wang Yu's team annihilation of Moonless Flowerless group had just happened, and everyone was still traumatized by it. When they heard that Wang Yu had come to Heavenly Star City, they couldn't help but be surprised. Oh, boss, you know that Grandmaster of Combat? Seeing the expressions of Moonless Blossom, Golden Blossom, and the others, the informant asked curiously. Yes. Moonless Blossom nodded, and then thought for a moment before saying, Go and notify everyone in the main guild to gather. Everyone in the main guild? Hearing Moonless Blossom's words, the underling was at a loss. It should be known that the so-called main guild was the Golden Time Guild, which did not wait for the other affiliated guilds. In total, the Golden Time Guild had a total of 500 members. The members of Moonless Blossom's team were all professional experts. Although they weren't considered the strongest among the professional expert teams in Heavenly Star City, they were still godlike existences in the eyes of their lackeys. Wasn't their current opponent just a trash Grandmaster of Combat? Was there a need to mobilize so many people? That's right. Moonless Bloom said, Don't let anyone know about this. Otherwise, the merit points won't be ours anymore. Moonless Bloom was also an extremely intelligent person. Naturally, he knew that the players from other guilds had not seen Wang Yu's abilities. If they heard that the opponent was just a grandmaster of combat, they would definitely treat Wang Yu like a chicken. In order to have a reasonable division of spoils, the fewer people that would go after Wang Yu, the better. At most, they would send a team. Moonless Bloom and the others had just suffered a loss at the hands of Wang Yu, so they naturally had to make ample preparations. If others found out about this, they would definitely follow suit, and the competition would be even more intense. After all, there were many major guilds in Heavenly Star City, and a guild like Golden Time wouldn't dare to say that they could snatch merit point from the hands of other guilds. I got it. The little brother answered and left. Looking at the back of the underling leaving, Golden Blossom said in confusion, "Boss, although that kid isn't easy to deal with, isn't it a little too much to capture one person with 500 people? How are we going to divide the merit points?" Obviously, as a leader, Golden Blossom's thinking was not much different from the leaders of other guilds. Moonless Bloom smiled faintly and said, "Do you want to get less merit points? Or do you want to get nothing at all?" "This," Golden Blossom said, "Of course, I want to get some merit points." "Then that's it." Moonless Bloom said, "We're just chasing after him, not fighting him head on. We'll only be confident if we have more people." "All right, you're right, boss." Although Golden Blossom still felt a little conflicted in his heart, he still nodded helplessly. In his heart, giving all the merit points to himself was the best outcome. On the streets of Heavenly Star City, Wang Yu continued to ask for the whereabouts of the glory of God. The result was obvious. Seeing that Wang Yu couldn't even speak the local language, the players on the streets all cast strange looks at Wang Yu. Wang Yu felt helpless. He had traveled far and wide for a long time, but he had never been to any city. Even the Dragon Emperor Dales, who had just been chatting with him, couldn't even ask for directions in Heavenly Star City. It seemed that knowledge was power. If a language expert, Bao San, was here, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. As time passed, Wang Yu grew tired of the monotonous task of asking for directions. Just as she was about to find a secluded place to log off and have a meal, a group of players appeared a short distance away from Wang Yu. The two players leading this group were none other than Shan Kuei and Hidden Ghost, whose weapons Wang Yu had stolen. That's the Grandmaster of Combat. Seeing Wang Yu leaning against the wall and sighing, Hidden Ghost pointed at Wang Yu and said to Tulip, who was beside him, "That's him. He's actually a Grandmaster of Combat." Originally, Tulip was worried that Wang Yu was an expert, and her group might not be able to catch him. However, after seeing Wang Yu's class, she couldn't help but smile. Grandmaster of Combat was synonymous with noobs. This was a godsend. Thinking of this, Tulip asked the people behind her, "Who wants the first wave of merit points?" Tulip was like Uncle Nyo. She had always convinced people with reason. Even if she wanted to eat alone in the guild, she still had to be democratic. Of course, whether others dared to be democratic with her was another matter. The boss asked you to eat first, and you just eat? How ignorant would you be to do such a thing? Hence, everyone said, "Boss, you go first." Huh. Hearing her subordinate's words, Tulip laughed and said, "Since you guys are so modest, then I won't stand on ceremony." "Boss, be careful." Shan Kuei couldn't help but remind her. "It's okay." Tulip waved her hand and said, "Tell the brothers at the resurrection point to guard. Watch me take his life with one arrow." Chapter 1575. Cloud-piercing bow and golden arrow. Boss is mighty. Seeing the bow and arrow in Tulip's hand, Shan Kuei and the others' eyes lit up, and they couldn't help but flatter her. Tulip smiled slightly and released the bowstring in her hand. The golden arrow transformed into a faintly discernible ray of light and shot towards Wang Yu. Everyone was envious when they saw this. When a normal crossbow shot, there would be the sound of the bowstring and the sound of the arrow tearing through the air. However, the bow and arrow in Tulip's hand were silent. Even the trajectory of the shot was faintly discernible, and it was extremely difficult to detect. Archers were assassins who hid far away. They were the strongest snipers in the game, so concealment was extremely important when ambushing a target. Tulip's attack was silent, and for an archer, it was definitely the biggest advantage. Tulip's arrow was extremely fast. Although everyone was dozens of meters away from Wang Yu, the arrow reached Wang Yu's back in the blink of an eye. Just when everyone thought that Wang Yu was going to be shot in the head, Wang Yu suddenly frowned, and the index and middle fingers of his right hand extended and pressed together. Clack! There was a soft sound. Tulip's arrow was firmly caught by Wang Yu's fingers, and then a golden arrow appeared in Wang Yu's hand. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Tulip's expression immediately darkened. In the game, strength was always respected. A guild as large as Sunflower was naturally full of experts. Without some skill, it would be impossible to control the situation. As the boss of Sunflower, Tulip naturally wasn't a vase who relied on her face to make a living. Everyone here was a core member and a great expert in the leadership level. After playing the game together for so long, everyone naturally knew Tulip's strength. Not to mention anything else, in the archer industry alone, no one had seen a player with a higher hit rate than Tulip. Yes, hit rate. The cloud-piercing bow and the golden arrow in Tulip's hands had extremely strong concealment and speed. They were silent and extremely fast. In Rebirth, when other classes PvP with archers, they would have to rely on their naked eyes to observe the flight of their opponent's arrows in order to determine where to dodge and block. Of course, there are also very few experts who could determine the direction of the arrows by listening. However, the bow and arrows in Tulip's hands were very strange. There were no traces or sounds at all. Even if it was a frontal attack, there were few people who could block or dodge Tulip's arrows. However, not only did the arrow not hit Wang Yu, but it was also caught by Wang Yu. This was the first time anyone had seen such a strange scene. What was even more terrifying was that Wang Yu's back was facing them from start to finish. In other words, Wang Yu didn't use his eyes at all. What the F***CK was going on? How much would it cost to buy such a hack? After all, Eugene Xiang was also an expert. Seeing that Wang Yu had only been stunned for a moment after receiving the arrow, she immediately reacted and hurriedly ordered, "Everyone, hurry up. Don't let him escape." Understood. With Eugene Xiang's reminder, the others also came to their senses. One by one, they took out their weapons and rushed toward Wang Yu. At this time, Wang Yu had already turned around and saw Tulip's group running toward him. Then, he looked at Shan Ke and the other man in the group and narrowed his eyes. Without saying anything, he broke into a run. Of course, Wang Yu ran to meet him. Those who were familiar with Wang Yu knew that Wang Yu was a modest person who didn't like to cause trouble. However, Wang Yu wasn't afraid of trouble. This was especially so after spending a long time with Chuanjin. Although Wang Yu's values hadn't gone astray, his little personality had been subtly influenced by the dogs of Chuanjin to become a little black. Originally, he was just asking for directions in a foreign land. It was fine if he didn't say anything, but when he turned around and wanted to kill someone, it was obviously a little unreasonable. Normally, with Wang Yu's dark personality, he would definitely kill these kinds of people several times if he had nothing better to do. However, considering that he had more important things to do outside, it was better to avoid trouble. Therefore, Wang Yu tolerated it and casually killed the two people once and didn't pursue the matter. However, these two people actually brought people to find trouble. This made Wang Yu unable to tolerate it. Currently, Wang Yu was feeling irritated because of the mission. Tulip's group coming to find trouble at this time was like running into the muzzle of a gun. Seeing that Wang Yu didn't run away when he saw their group, but instead rushed toward them, everyone was surprised again. Well, this kid is still courting death. He actually dares to be so arrogant. Does he think he can fight against 10 of us alone? Damn it, he's simply looking down on us. For a moment, everyone couldn't help but feel angry. After all, no one wanted to be looked down on. When Shan Koei and Hidden Ghost saw Wang Yu rushing over, they couldn't help but warn everyone, be careful. This guy is not easy to deal with. T. At this time, the shield warrior, where the ends, who was rushing at the front, heard the two's warning and spat out a mouthful of saliva. Him? As he spoke, where the ends raised the giant shield in his hand and smashed it at Wang Yu, who was less than 3 meters away from him. Ah! Wang Yu smiled slightly and suddenly braked. His entire body immediately stopped in place. Shield Bash was not a long-range attack skill. On the contrary, because the shield was not a long-range weapon, Shield Bash's attack range was extremely short, only about 1 meter. It was slightly better than a Grandmaster of Combat, but slightly worse than an Assassin. The attack range was very awkward. The reason why where the ends dared to use this skill on Wang Yu from 3 meters away was because he had predicted it. With Wang Yu's forward speed, when the Shield Bash fell, it would just hit Wang Yu. From this, it could be seen that where the end's strength was not weak. Unfortunately, his opponent was Wang Yu. Where the ends never imagined that Wang Yu's reaction would be so fast. He stopped when he said he would, without the slightest bit of inertia. Whoosh! Since Wang Yu stopped in his tracks, where the end's prediction naturally became useless. Where the end's shield smashed into thin air, and he almost staggered and fell to the ground. Just as where the end's shield fell, Wang Yu suddenly took a step forward, crossing over a meter of distance. His right hand reached forward and grabbed the top of where the end's skull. Without waiting for where the end's skill to freeze, Wang Yu's hand suddenly pulled down. Thump! Where the ends, who was originally unsteady on his feet, was directly pressed to the ground by Wang Yu. Where the ends was naturally not someone who could be trampled on easily. After he was knocked down, he struggled to get up. At the same time, Wang Yu raised his leg and used Thunder Stomp, which was covered in lightning from top to bottom, onto the back of where the end's head. Although Shield Warriors had a lot of HP, the only thing that posed a threat to Wang Yu was her giant shield. Without the shield's protection, World's End naturally wouldn't be able to survive Wang Yu's snipe. Bang! Minus 143,322. Chapter 1576. F***CK. Seeing that World's End had been stomped to death by Wang Yu, Tulip and the others who were charging towards Wang Yu were startled and immediately stopped in their tracks. Meow. Beyond the horizon was a shield warrior with thick skin and thick flesh. Not only did he have high HP, but his defense was also monstrous. Even without a shield, he could easily endure a wave of damage with just his equipment. Yet, he had only taken a single kick from his opponent, and he had been instantly killed. Was this really a Grandmaster of Combat who was known for being weak? Of course, seeing Wang use terrifying damage, Tulip and the others were more excited than surprised. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as the strongest class, only the strongest players. Not just normal players, even professional players would find it hard to deal with those godly tycoons who were willing to spend money to the extreme. From this, one could see the importance of RMB in the game. RMB players carried silver on them, which could be called mobile ATM machines. Because of this, RMB players were basically like a weaker version of the boss in the eyes of some expert players. However, the items dropped by RMB players were definitely not inferior to the boss. After all, to be able to make a trash class like the Grandmaster of Combat into a terrifying existence that could instantly kill a shield warrior, it was impossible to do this without a net worth of hundreds of millions. Although paywalls were nothing more than pocket money for tycoons, it was still a windfall for ordinary players if they could obtain a spare part from the game. It was said that the Chinese were rich, but everyone still did not believe it. Now that they saw Wang Yu, Tulip, and the others were really convinced. A mage called Worldly Righteousness beside Tulip wiped his saliva and said, F***CK. If we kill this bastard, we'll be rich. Don't talk nonsense. Shan Kuei frowned and said, this guy can kill Wang Yu with one kick. Do you think he's easy to deal with? Hee hee. Tulip laughed coldly. So what? We still have 9 people. We can even defeat a boss. Why should we be afraid of a fake boss? After saying that, Tulip said again, this guy's attack is too high. We can't take it head on. Control him. All right. Humanity's path of righteousness received the order and raised his staff to conjure magic. Meanwhile, Wang Yu had rushed to the Tulip family's location while they were talking. A player's HP was much lower than a boss's, so a PvP tank wouldn't be of much use. As a result, Tulip's party didn't have many frontliners. Other than World's End, there was only Shan Kuei. Shan Kuei knew how powerful Wang Yu was, so when he saw Wang Yu charging at him, he was very afraid and involuntarily took 2 steps back. F***CK. Shan Kuei, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop him. The others cursed angrily. Right now, Shan Kuei was the only frontline player. If he didn't block Wang Yu, wouldn't everyone else be exposed to Wang Yu? Everyone was ganging up on each other. If Shan Kuei could hold off Wang Yu and buy some time for the others, as long as Wang Yu was restrained, no matter how good his equipment was, it would be useless. But now, Shan Kuei was actually running back. It was truly infuriating. Seeing that his companions were angry, Shan Kuei had no choice but to bite the bullet. He pulled out a great sword and swung it at Wang Yu. Seeing this, Wang Yu didn't stop. Without waiting for Shan Kuei's long sword to fall, Wang Yu suddenly accelerated and rolled under Shan Kuei's arm. The moment he got up, Wang Yu kicked Shan Kuei's calf. Shan Kuei let out a blood-curdling scream as he was kicked to the ground by Wang Yu. Meanwhile, Wang Yu charged towards Tulip family's group while sticking close to the ground. At this time, Wang Yu was less than 5 meters away from Tulip's party. With Wang Yu's speed, even if Tulip drew her bow, it would be too late. Archers, mages, and priests were range classes. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to get close to their opponents. Tulip's party didn't say anything. They threw down humanity's path of righteousness and turned to run. You sold out your teammates just like that? Wang Yu couldn't help but look at them in disdain. Winter's Rage. But before Wang Yu landed on the spot where Tulip had been standing, humanity's path of righteousness had finished condensing. He raised his staff and smashed it on the ground. Crash! Along with the sound of ice forming, blue frost spread out from the human world's righteous path with the center. Wherever the frost went, everything on the ground turned into ice sculptures. Wang Yu saw this and couldn't help but be slightly surprised. Winter's Rage, a level 60 Ice Mage skill. It could freeze players within the skill's range. Its power was not inferior to the ultimate skill, 1,000 Miles of Ice. The difference was that Winter's Rage spread 360 degrees with the caster as the center, while 1,000 Miles of Ice swept out a path of ice in front of the caster. In comparison, although Winter's Rage was not as flexible as 1,000 Miles of Ice, its defense was extremely high. When this skill was used in a team battle, it would basically be the end of the line. Seeing that Wang Yu was about to be frozen by his skill, humanity's path of righteousness snorted coldly and revealed a cunning smile. But just as Wang Yu was about to land on the ground, Wang Yu calmly pressed both of his palms on the ground. Bang! A blue wave of chi was released from Wang Yu's palms and smashed on the ground. Under the recoil of the chi wave, Wang Yu's originally falling body suddenly rose by 0.5 meter and flew backward. After stabilizing his body, Wang Yu's feet tapped in the air and completed a double jump. Then, he did a backflip and jumped out of humanity's skill range. Pata! With a soft sound, Wang Yu landed steadily from the air. The smile on humanity's face had completely frozen. Tulip and the others almost cursed out loud. Damn it, how could this skill be dodged? Did the RMB players not care about their pride? It could be said that this group of people were simply not strong enough. If a pro-level expert was here, they would definitely be shocked by Wang Yu's heaven-defying reaction speed and terrifying mechanical skills, not the equipment on Wang Yu's body. Damn it, if a pay-to-win player could be this strong, this game would probably be finished. After all, there were hundreds and thousands of rich tycoons, but there was only one Wang Yu in the world. After landing, Wang Yu did not stop at all. Both of his feet stomped on the ground, and once again jumped high into the air, jumping towards humanity's confused. Humanity's path of righteousness hurriedly turned around and ran. Unfortunately, a mage was a mage. An intellectual class was racing against an agile class. How stupid must one be to do such a thing? It was obvious that righteous Sek's mind was blank. It seemed that their mentality had a great impact on their battle. Bang! Righteous path of humanity had only taken a few steps when Wang Yu caught up to him from behind and stepped on his head. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.